Okay, I'd like to call this meeting to order. Just to notice a recognition of the territories. So I'd like to recognize that we're doing business within the Tishat and Hukachusa First Nation territories. This meeting is being recorded and live streamed to YouTube on the Regional District website. And introductions, and we can start on this side here.
Good afternoon. I'm Heather Zenner, Manager of Administrative Services.
Mike Sparrow, Regional Director for Cherry Creek.
Terry Fong, Chief Financial Officer.
Good afternoon. Akama Penekote, Alberni Clayoquot Regional District, Sprout Lake Rep. Thank you.
Amy Anaka, ACRD Planner.
Good afternoon. Alex Dyer, Planning Manager.
Brooke Eschuk, Junior Planner.
Mike Kerr, General Manager of Planning and Development. And Brooke has just started with the Regional District, and we'll do the official introductions at the next board meeting. But we thought this would be a good opportunity for Brooke to meet the electoral area directors, and that's going to be the focus of most of her work. So thank you.
Welcome officially to the ACRD boardroom, Brooke. I'm Fred Boyko, Regional Director for Beaufort.
I'm Daniel Sayan, the CAO for the ACRD.
And on Zoom, we should start with Bob.
Good afternoon, Bob Beckett, Area A, Banfield.
And Vega.
Veda Siga, Director for Area C, Long Beach.
Okay, so we have a late agenda item, correspondence for information. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda, including the late items?
I'm going to add an agenda item as well, and we're going to have to vote on this. We're going to add an in-camera item, Baseline Community Charter, Article 90, Part 1. A part of the council meeting may be closed to the public if the subject matter being considered relates to or is one or more of the following. Article F, law enforcement, if the council considers that disclosure can reasonably be expected to harm the conduct of an investigation under or enforcement of an enactment.
Okay, so motion's carried?
No.
Oh, okay. So all in favor? Motion carried? So now we're moving to the so
we just added something to the agenda.
okay.
And so we can just do approve the agenda.
Okay. So can we vote to approve the agenda as amended, please? All in favor? Okay. All in favor? Motion carried. So now we're moving to Electoral Area Director Committee meeting minutes held on September 27th, 2023.
I'll move to accept the
Fred Boyko moved to accept the minutes. Seconder by Mike Sparrow. Any comments or additions? All in favor? Motion carried. Okay, petitions, delegations, and presentations with a 10-minute maximum. Do you have any? Okay. And we move to correspondence for action and information. Nothing.
So that's the late item that we added, and that was a letter from the Sprout Lake District property owners. Correspondence received on November 28th regarding vote outcomes and information from a November 19th Sprout Lake District Town Hall meeting. So the letter was emailed out to the board yesterday, and it's available at the back for the public.
Thank you. Oh, sorry, Penny.
Thank you. So I did attend this meeting that was put on by the Sprout Lake owners. It's interesting that they're saying that there was this many people there, and I saw. I did not put up my hand, so I did not vote. So they cannot count my vote. I was there as an observer only. Was not asked to participate in this meeting. There was a lot of speculation, I guess, and I would really like to continue on with the community to go over the information that was provided at the ACRD open house. I think that that's information that would be very valuable to the community. So I'd like to have another meeting and invite staff to participate going forward where they have factual information that could be at hand. So I'll leave it at that at this point, but do I need to move to receive this?
Through the chair. Yes, we should just receive it for information. And I'll also flag that I received a copy under separate cover, the same letter. And I did reach out to the group just asking if they could share the information that they considered prior to voting. I haven't received a response yet.
Okay, thank you. So I'll move to receive.
Can we get a seconder, please? Mike, thank you. All in favor? Motion carried. Okay, requests for decisions. Community planning engagement summary and next steps. So is that Alex or Mike?
It'll be both of us. So quite a bit of information in this report. And I think Amy is going to just put some slides up just to run through some of it. Certainly want to have a lot of opportunity for discussion and input from the directors. So I thought just to introduce this, if we can go to the next slide. So really the purpose is to provide an overview of the engagement that took place between October 6th and November 12th. We had 6 open houses in each of the electoral areas, as well as an online survey. And want to have, again, opportunity for the directors to discuss the 3 options that are presented in the staff in the report here. As well, and to begin with, want to run through the summary and have some discussion about the feedback that has been received to date. And again, I think as we go through the summary, I'd like the opportunity for each of the electoral area directors to talk about what the feedback they got and their take on the open houses as well. And then we will come back to the 3 options, and really would like to recommend that we have the directors have a fulsome discussion on each of the options before voting on which direction to go. So I will just ask Amy to bring up the 3 options. I wanted to just highlight that in the staff report talks about the 3 options about how to proceed with the OCP zoning bylaw. And now I'm going to turn it over to Alex, if that's okay. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Mike. So as highlighted in the report, this public engagement included the online survey that was live from October 6th to November 12th, and in-person open houses and workshop events were hosted in all 6 electoral areas. And I know that all of the directors were there and attendants were there, so that was great. The 3-hour events hosted at the local community spaces included the first half as an open house with display boards to review and provide input on, and the second half included facilitated workshop discussions. Now, all of the fall 2023 engagement activities were focused on these 5 key topics you see on the screen here. These key themes were identified and highlighted for more discussion through what we heard from the public, from our APCs, and from the board on the zoning bylaw review project over the last year and a half or so. The questions that were developed within these themes were included in all all of our fall engagement activities, including the survey, the open houses, and the workshop discussions. So jumping right into it, we will unpack some of the area specific input that we heard and the input on the key topics. But first, I wanted to highlight a few of the key trends that were identified throughout all of our engagement activities. These were consistent themes that we heard across the region. First and foremost, the first bullet point there, a general desire for less regulations in rural areas, provided that a common sense approach can be employed to deal with nuisances. There is a desire to allow for more flexibility in how residents can use their properties in rural areas and for more common sense regulations. A general theme that was consistently identified by those that want fewer regulations is that there still needs to be a mechanism and some ability to respond to nuisances where appropriate. More opportunities for public engagement and appreciation for the opportunities that were provided during this engagement. So people want to be heard, and they want an outlet to engage with the regional district on community planning. There was an appreciation expressed for these opportunities that took place in the fall, and a desire to keep the conversation going and to have more of a say in their communities. And then on that theme, maintaining a community-minded approach to community planning. So a desire for a ground-up approach and for regulations that are appropriate and well-suited for the community. Improving communication with the public on the area OCPs and zoning bylaw. This relates to the desire for more engagement opportunities, but also extends to a general feeling we heard that there should be more education on what OCP bylaws do and what zoning bylaws do and what impact they can have on the community. And finally, there was a lot of dialogue on bylaw enforcement and a general desire for bylaws to be consistently enforced where appropriate, and that the process should be as transparent, accountable, and responsive as possible. Is there any questions or comments on these general themes?
Thank you. I'd just like to give my approval and think that it's great to have community involvement and engagement. And I think that is the right path for us to be going down. So just giving my thumbs up. Thank you.
My question comes from the more opportunities for public engagement on community planning matters throughout the region, which is great. So does that mean like more public hearings? Because people are also saying they don't want the public hearings to speed the process up. And secondly, how is the government new regulations going to impact the planning process throughout the communities?
That's a great question. What we heard was not necessarily for more public hearings, but for more opportunities for dialogue, more back and forth with staff, the director, the area APC members, and other members of their community. That's really the opportunity that I think people want. The changes that the province is proposing on public hearings looks like it may remove the ability to hold public hearings for certain zoning amendment applications that are consistent with the area OCPs. But that's also partnered with more upfront engagement on a more robust and more updated OCPs. So I think that the province wants us to front load our public engagement on how we develop OCPs that are really reflective of what the community wants. And that the vision that the province has would be the rezoning applications and the site-specific applications that are consistent with that vision would be streamlined.
Also with the APC committee, then we'd have to try and get them up and running to a set level because they'll be more involved and they'll have a bigger say in the community going forward. So we need to get them trained up to a level where they can feel confident that they know the community values and what needs to be done. Is that right?
Thank you. So I just have a question about public engagement here. So we're all getting people involved and having these public hearings or public meetings and stuff like that. But the numbers we're seeing are much higher during a grassroots town hall. Basically what we're doing at the, Beaufort Beaver Creek meetings, things like that. Whereas we get 100, 150 people show up and then we had 13 at this meeting. So we need to figure out a way to effectively engage the public because we're all talking about we're getting good feedback, but in reality, I don't think that's actually what's happening or it could be much more improved, right? We need to have the directors actually talk to people and listen to them and see what they're actually saying and effectively pass on the message. But I do agree with the general themes that are being presented in each of the electoral areas that less rules, more individual bylaws per area, these kind of things. That's my initial thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. I agree that there is a lot of consultation through the grassroots or the unauthorized regional district meetings. It's kind of how I see it. I would, the meeting from Sprout Lake owners that happened in my area was, there was people that had attended the open house that didn't attend this. So it's kind of hard to justify in my area. It's different. I've had communication engagement with my community over the last however many years through newsletter and public engagement or through our community association. So that has worked. We've had general meetings. This group that's come forward now is following a trend that's happening in other areas. Not specifically to work with the regional district, but on their own, which doesn't, in my mind, doesn't make any sense because I think that they really need to work with the regional district because they're talking about making changes to the regional district. So if it was advertised that this was not an ACRD meeting, I attended as an observer only. I was not asked to participate. So it's that portion is excluding the regional district. And I think that's a really important, integral part of us being able to communicate with our communities and actually get the right information out there so that correct decisions, well-informed decisions are made by the community. I love the engagement. Don't get me wrong there, but I want to see the connection with the ACRD happen going forward. Our open house was very well attended, and questions can still come in. Thanks.
I'll just say from a staff perspective in organizing, when we look at organizing these events, in this case, we had a World Cafe style, and part of the reason for a World Cafe is that you get smaller groups sitting at a table that can have dialogue, and it tends to mean that a small vocal minority doesn't necessarily rule the theme of the meeting. That isn't always the case. In some cases, some larger town hall style meetings are extremely effective. And I think what we'll find as we work through this is that in different areas, there'll be different styles that resonate with people that they prefer. And you know, if I can use Beaufort as an example, the World Cafe wasn't as popular in Beaufort as it was everywhere else. And we know that the town hall style meeting does work. And so it provides us an opportunity to say, okay, next time around, let's take a look at that style. I think married with an open house and always married with an online survey, because not everyone can make a live meeting, just helps us collect the information, meet people where they're at, and have forums that they like. And I think every area is going to be nuanced. And that's the beauty of a process like this, is that it isn't once and done. You know, some people might think it takes too long, but the beauty of a longer process is that we have time to adapt and have more focused discussions in different areas in a different way. And so, yeah, I just wanted to flag that because I know that we started with more of a standardized approach. And that was, we felt necessary because of where we were leaving from the zoning bylaw and the information collected there. But we will adapt in different areas as we move forward, and we'll work with the area directors as we prepare the next rounds.
Thank you, Daniel. I agree with what you're saying, and each area is different. There are some common themes that are coming out of a town hall, be it unauthorized or whatever we want to call it. People getting together and talking. That's always a good thing. Or the OCP. But like I said, majority of respondents express desire to have individual zoning bylaws per each area. Right? In Beaufort, a lot of the stuff doesn't apply. Cut it off, make it disappear, cut the bylaws in half, right? We don't have docks. There's docks here. Well, I can't see water. Oh, there is. There's docks in Banfield. You have all the docks you want. Figure out what you get, right? As long as the director has support of the people, I would gladly vote for what they want to do there. Basically. And it should go for everywhere else too. Find out what the people want, right? If you got a whole bunch of people getting together and talking, and it's a significant 5 to 10% of the population showing up, that's a significant portion. And we're basing all our surveys for the aquatic center and things like that on 5, 6% of the population. You got to listen to the people that get together, and it's not a small vocal minority when you have 5% of the people showing up, right? Right? And if we're going to make $1 million decisions based on 5% of the population, you got to be able to carry that to every electoral area. Thank you.
Okay, I think we'll keep moving on. Thank you for the discussion already. This has been great. So what this slide shows us is the event dates and the total number of event attendees that we had in each area, as well as the survey responses from those areas. I will highlight there was a total of 285 attendees that were signed in for these in-person events, which is great, as well as 249 online survey responses that were received. The full survey results and all of the comments received are posted on the website, in addition to the scanned copies of the interactive display boards from each event. These are available on the ACRD Community Planning Engagement website if anybody's looking to find them. I also wanted to highlight that a full community planning engagement report is being prepared by staff, which will include more detailed information on the input received in each electoral area, in a format where we can discuss with the area APCs or with the community as part of future engagement events. So I think what I wanted to do now is just quickly summarize the community visioning input in each area and provide an opportunity for each of those directors to share any additional takeaways on visioning, if you like. So a few of the takeaways that we will highlight from the in-person events include what people appreciate about their community, or what's missing, what changes they would make today, and how they would see their community look in 10 years. So Beaufort was the first event that we held on October 10th. As you heard, there were 13 participants involved at that meeting, farmers, longtime residents, a couple newer residents as well, which is great to see. There were 13 online respondents to the survey as well. Discussion at the workshop really focused on less regulations, less bylaws, keep it rural. Self-reliance was highlighted as something that is appreciated in the area and forms part of the 10-year vision for how the area would look like, I guess. Director Boyko, do you want to add anything else to that?
Yes, thank you, Alex. Yeah, it was a good event. We basically, instead of bouncing from table to table, we just sat at one table because there wasn't enough people to go around. And we basically went through the topics as we wanted to go through, but the themes were less is more. Less bylaws is more what people want. Less regulations, but also have some common sense approach to any potential bylaw problems and how to deal with it. One of the things that came out of that is if we go to the next step, which would be comprehensive OCP review and then work on individual zoning bylaws for each area, is instead of sitting down in a town hall and talking to everybody, which would turn into a bit of a nightmare when you have 150 people there, even if they do have similar thoughts, is take apart a section, 5-10 pages, go to the advisory planning committee once a month, talk about these small portion of the topic, power through it. Like in Beaufort, we got 13 people in the advisory planning committee, which is 3% of the population, significant, and we can power through that in an organized manner and power through it in a couple months and make it a useful exercise, and then go back and talk to people about it instead of taking months and years to go through this process. But if you have a small group that represents everybody, give them a small set of topics to go through. Do we want this? Do we not want it? Change it. Done. Move on. That's my thoughts. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you. Oh.
Thank you. I think that's jumping ahead, quite ahead. I'm not sure. Okay. I'm just, when I hear that, I'm not opposed to anything, but I'd like more information. So what I'd like for information is what would the cost be for that compared to us doing a joint zoning bylaws and then piecemealing out the areas that you don't want to see happen. So I'd really like to know what the costs are going to break down. Thanks.
I could jump in just real, and we're going to talk, I think, about the costs in a little bit. And at this stage, we don't have any real concrete or firm costs. We know what's going to cost less and what's going to cost more. But wanting to get some direction from the committee first before we bring some of that back. But that is going to be something that we will be talking about today. If that's okay, I do think it'd be good to hear from every area, and then the next step we'll be talking about the options, and that's where the cost discussion would come in as well. If that makes sense.
Okay, thank you. Cherry Creek was the next event. It was held on October 12th. As you see, there were 76 participants, which was great in engagement for that area. We're really happy to see that. Highlights of community visioning input received at this event included appreciation for good water and the unity that they have within the community. What's missing or what changes should be made include more public information, a streamlined application process, changes to the bylaw enforcement process, and better access to meat processing facilities, and an upgraded water system. So in 10 years, participants at that meeting wanted more freedom, more transparency, and more opportunities for farming in their community. Director Sparrow, do you want to add anything else to that?
Thank you for that. It was well intended. In fact, one of the problems which people have is it too noisy in there. There's that many volume people talking at once, not yelling, just the resonance of the volume. So that part was good. I know one of the topic is about water and water stability, and that is not exactly under our purview at this time. It may be, it may not, never be. We don't know. But that's one of the things that I'm looking at if it does come this way, to look at, make sure we can get water stability there and going forward. And I do know the 5 acre thing for businesses didn't fly too well in May, probably still flying too well out there. So we'll have to look at that and see if we can come up with an idea what will work for the community out there. Fully support anything that they can say and do. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Water was something that was discussed in each area because it really is related to community planning. The Beaver Creek event was held on October 16th at the Fire Hall. There were 53 residents in attendance at that one. Highlights for community visioning at this event focused on the establishing a 10-year vision that would work toward maintaining their own water source. Lots of discussion about that. A community center or hall that would be closer to the area, more places to gather within the community, a bike lane along Beaver Creek Road, and then more policing and speed control on the roads. Lots of discussion on that as well. Director Roth, do you want to add?
Yes, I think ours, whenever I attended, it said, a lot of people said to me they want less regulation, less is more, just like they're seeing in Beaufort. Common sense approach to bylaw enforcement. Individual zoning bylaws, lots about the 5 acre that Mike was talking about. They want smaller sizes when it comes to regulations on businesses or that type of thing, smaller property sizes. That's what I got mostly out of it. But drinking water is a big priority that I noticed too.
That's great. Thank you. So Sprout Lake was our next event on October 23rd. 85 people were there at the community hall. Highlights we heard on what's missing in the community include a corner store, a decent boat launch with parking, improved fuel dock facilities, and streetlights. It was a hot topic. Some people do not want streetlights, others do. What changes they'd like to make include a greater emphasis on ecosystem protection, controlling invasive species in the lake, regulating boat speeds and wake boats is a hot topic out there. And as part of a 10-year vision, they'd like clean water, no free moorage for the public, essentially, designated wake surfing areas, no public transit to Sprout Lake, and a greater RCMP presence on the lake. There was a lot of engagement at Sprout Lake, and it was really a diversity of perspectives that we heard. I just want to highlight that this is intended as a snapshot of what we heard, and the more detailed summary is found in the report. If anybody said something and they feel like that wasn't reiterated here, it is in the report and in the full survey results as well. Director Cote, do you want to add anything else?
Thank you. Through the chair. So I always hear about the docks and Bob's Rock. Water conservation is something that I think that may need to be implemented in the future. Wanting to work with the rest of the regional district regarding the water plan. Short-term vacation rentals also is an issue. There's a lot of short-term vacation rentals that don't have the temporary use permits. The property size to be able to have a secondary unit on the property is an issue as well. And that's what I got out of this public hearing. Thank you, or public meeting. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So moving to the West Coast, the Long Beach event was held on November 6th. There were 26 people there. Great discussions were had with many newer residents of the area, which was again nice to see. Highlights in community visioning included an appreciation for the great water quality that they have out there and the paved bike path they have in the community. What's missing is a playground and public meeting space, more accessible spaces, and support for young families. What changes they'd like to see as part of the 10-year vision include more green development, improved access to Barclay Sound, utilizing the road right-of-ways for community spaces or public spaces, and a greater partnership with the youth movement government. Director Siga, do you want to add anything else there?
I just thought that the team led a really good discussion and was very impressed with what came out of the meeting. And I think everybody is pretty much on the same page. It's interesting that it was out our way where we're dealing with tourism, but we want to maintain community and recognize that permanent residents are the base of volunteer infrastructure in our communities, that the non-resident ownership, we seem to be taking a different tack than Sprout Lake, so we might need different bylaws. I thought we could get away with just basically one set of OCP bylaws, just with a few individual differences, but based on this information, yeah, it's giving me some pause to think here. But thank you to the team, and I appreciate the work that's being done.
That's great, thank you. So finally, the traveling circus went up Banfield, and that event was held on November 9th with 32 attendees there. The community is very engaged in Banfield, so we're happy to see that. And our community services team actually participated with us, and they gathered some initial input on the Banfield Sewer Connection Community Interest Project. Highlights in community visioning included an appreciation for the isolation and wilderness that they have out there. What's missing included access to moorage and public dock space, boat launch facilities, more public transportation, on-street parking, and a community hall. What changes they'd like to make are incentivizing transportation options to get to Port Alberni, reducing carbon footprint in new construction, and a kayak share was actually discussed. In 10 years, they'd like their community to look wild and to move ahead with sustainable development that is accessible for more families and more childcare options and greater diversity. Director Beckett, do you want to add any additional comments there?
Yeah, thank you. I think, first of all, I was duly impressed with the process. I liked how staff had organized the tables, the posters were very encouraging, especially with staff providing some leadership and providing and giving confidence to those in attendance by encouraging them to provide the feedback. The table settings were absolutely excellent in that staff didn't try to lead the discussion, but tried again to encourage a diverse type of discussion, as well as opening it up for other items to be tabled. And I just found it so refreshing to hear from the community on a number of topics, things that weren't necessarily planned to be discussed, So I just found the whole process very welcoming. The one concern I have is that given the nature of our community, where we do have a number of seasonal homeowners there, I'm just wondering if down the road, can we look at a hybrid? And I know that would be very difficult given this type of makeup, but is there any way we could do a hybrid in the off summer season to include some of these seasonal owners? But overall, I was very impressed, and look forward to, this is a key point, look forward to the follow-up in-person visit where we're providing that feedback and flushing some of that stuff out. Thank you.
That's fantastic. I agree that especially on the West Coast communities, that a hybrid format or some combination of both is appropriate. So if it's all right, I think we'll keep going into the topic discussions now. So as I mentioned before, there is a more detailed breakdown of the responses on the community visioning questions that are provided in the summary report attached to this agenda. One of the questions we'd asked was for people to provide 3 words that describe their community. So a total of 772 words for different terms were provided to describe one's community, and these are presented visually here in a word cloud. The most often used words were peaceful, quiet, and beautiful, which I thought was interesting. Other commonly used terms across the region: friendly, rural, safe, natural or nature, clean, caring, resilient, unique. So it was interesting to see all that and realize there's actually a lot of commonality across the region. And then another topic that we've already discussed already a little bit, but I'm sure there's more discussion to come, is the question of one zoning bylaw versus multiple. So a majority of survey respondents and open house participants expressed a desire to explore developing individual zoning bylaws in each area. The support for individual bylaws highlighted that each area is unique, as we've discussed, and a belief that a one-size-fits-all approach doesn't work. Support for maintaining one regional zoning bylaw that we heard included a viewpoint that one bylaw would be easier to interpret and understand, and that one bylaw could have the flexibility to respond to unique aspects within each community, which would be highlighted in those area OCPs. Any questions or comments on that?
Thank you, Alex. Yeah, I think I've read all the poster boards for each area, and individual zoning bylaws come up on every one. Every area is unique and different. I'm trying to remember what you just said there. There's one thing you said that true on that. One size fits all. One size fits all is not working. Interpretation of problems. So the ACRD has had a little bit of problem with who's in what area in the past 2 general elections. I think everyone is very aware of what area they live in now. So when you come up to the planning board and you say, hey, I'm in Beaufort, here's my address, this are my bylaws, pick it off the shelf and use it. So I don't think there's going to be a lot of potential issues with what area you live in and what are your potential bylaws. So I think we've learned a lot from the past little while of who's in what actual area. Even if they got Cherry Creek water, they might be in Beaufort. I mean, we've had that issue twice now. And I think that's all resolved. One thing I've heard is having the individual director being responsible for their own area and having other directors vote on what happens in other areas. That's come up in multiple places. So I think it also comes down to education on how the board actually works. And people vote together, especially in planning matters. It's just us 6 plus Stefano that actually votes in those kind of things. But just understanding how the board works is really important in educating the people on that. But like I said, if the director's got the support of the people for whatever is happening, I will gladly vote for whatever they want to do in their area. Thank you.
Okay, so the second topic that we discussed were RVs, ADUs, and housing. In general, throughout the region, there was support for allowing more long-term dwelling in RVs, provided that the unit is connected to services. The primary reason for supporting dwelling in an RV is the need to provide a variety of housing options, and we heard a large variety at those events, including staff housing as identified in Long Beach. In Sprout Lake, there was a wider diversity of opinions again, and less overall support for allowing long-term RVs all summer or for longer terms. These perspectives may be explained by the experiences they've had with short-term rentals in the community, as well as the impact that inappropriate sewage disposal can have on drinking water quality in the lake. Where people were asked to identify how to regulate RVs on a property, many respondents maintained that it could depend on a lot size, and 46% of survey respondents here expressed that one RV per lot for long-term dwelling would seem to be appropriate. Concerns identified for long-term dwelling in RV really centered on health and safety of the occupants, and increased density impacting community services and traffic in the area, and just the general unsightliness and nuisance issues that can come with these. I'm also just going to highlight the ADUs and housing first as well before we get into some more discussion. Widespread support throughout the region for allowing more options for building ADUs or secondary housing units to respond to the housing crisis, but also to create opportunities for rental income to help homeowners with the cost of living. Support for more flexibility on housing included allowing ADUs on lots that are smaller than 1 acre, allowing ADUs that are larger than the 90 square meter maximum, which is just for reference is just under 1,000 square feet, and allowing more than one ADU per lot, depending on lot size and servicing. Challenges identified were similar to the long-term dwelling in RVs: increased density, impact on community services and traffic. And residents in Banfield and Sprout Lake expressed a concern that housing units should not become more short-term rental units, and that they should be dedicated for housing in the community. Any questions at all on RVs, housing, or ADUs?
Thank you for that. I know it's on 1 acre, or where it is right now. One of the ironies is, 1 acre lot, and you wanted to put an ADU on it, and you have to put water service in front, and get an easement for the water service. You no longer become a 1 acre lot, and you can't put the ADU on because now you're too small because you lost the easement. So I know it sounds ridiculous, but that does happen and has happened. So I understand that putting on lower lots and putting more units on per lot, and that sort of goes with the provincial regulations that are forcing cities to do, not to the density of the rural districts. So that all looks good there, because if it goes back again to the APC being allowed to do this, and they'll have more say on what's going to happen. So, and also for going back to the other part about the living in your trailer, I think that's going to become more of a reality, unfortunately, in the next few years. And as long as the density regulations aren't there, because I don't know how close you can get them in the regional district. It depends on what area you're in and when they're put in. Some are almost touching, some are quite a few feet apart. We should put a bylaw in designing the distances between them too, so we know how dense we can get them and designated lots. Because I said, I know some places they're almost touching each other. You can't get between them, so we have to look at that too, I think.
I thought staff would reply. I was waiting. I have a question regarding RVs. Previously, I've been around for too long. There was years that went by where regular RVs, they needed to have 110, not 110, or they had to have a higher electrical capacity or something. Insulation was an issue. And I'm just wondering what the difference is if there's been a change in regulations as to why we're considering this. Thank you.
I think that the last question about why we're considering this, the ACRD, is because it's come up, and because people are asking to have RVs as more permanent housing. I think around the standards, I think that's referencing the standards between mobile homes, which are single family dwellings and intended to be lived in full time versus our recreational vehicles, which the intention isn't that they can be lived in full time. And and as we work through, in whatever direction we're going to go, we're going to talk about that. Some of the discussion needs to be about how the community or the different areas want what they want, what kinds of things they want. But some of the things I think it's going to be important for all of us to keep in mind and that we share with the community when we go out is when we get into land use regulations versus nuisance regulations. So we can't, it becomes a challenge to, if you zone and allow something as a land use, so the storage of RVs, for example, on your property, or numerous RVs for people to live in, we can't then impose nuisance regulations if they're allowed, right? We have a lot less discretion in that. And then also keeping in mind some things, and these are going to be discussions that we have to have with the community, is when does rural and agricultural use or residential use, when does that become a commercial or industrial use? And where's that line? We've had a lot of discussion about that, and I think really good discussion, and it's really important, and how things flow between. We're going to talk about home occupation and home industry, more in a bit, but it's where does that line come in? Because we do periodically have instances where it becomes a problem, and when it becomes a health issue because of sewer or water, there's other island health gets involved and the province gets involved. But fundamentally, the land use is always going to be with the local government or the regional district in this case. And it's something we need to keep in mind as we do the community planning on where we want to go and what types of things we want. And it always is really planning for the worst case scenario. So something to keep in mind as we work.
Thanks. Just a continuation here. There's been a couple of issues at Sprout Lake. There was an application years ago where someone wanted to have snowbirds able to winter over at Sprout Lake. And it had to do with the dwellings, that they weren't recognized as a dwelling like a mobile home would be. That was part of the issue. And now I've got another issue at Great Central where there seems to be permanent RVs where it was supposed to be a campsite. So there's all kinds of issues that are around these RVs and regulations that haven't been addressed. So I'd really like to figure out how to work with that. Thank you.
And if I just quickly respond, based on the direction from the board, I mean, I would recommend that we include those kinds of discussions and the engagement with the community, and delve into some of the technical aspects about building code and fire codes and things like that as well, around those types of issues, and do some research on where are there areas have had issues.
Thank you for the explanation. Lively discussion. One of the reasons that RVs are coming up more and more is this country as a whole is importing 500,000 immigrants a year. They all got to go somewhere. Some will make it to the Alberni Valley. Some will make it to the electoral areas. They need somewhere to go. They can't afford $1 million house. They can't afford $1 million acreage. They potentially can live in an RV that's either supplied or buy one for 30, 40, 50 grand, whatever they're going now, and actually survive and live and thrive. That's the current environment we're living in. That's not going to change for at least a couple of years. And we have to adapt and overcome and meet these challenges. Right? So that's reality. Just because we don't want them in our area, they have to go somewhere. So that's where I think of each area needs their own bylaws. There's NIMBYism involved as well. And we have to overcome that wherever that's taking place. But that's what's happening. Me personally, I just finished living in an RV myself for 2 years working on a job, right? But RVs are now made to live full time in. Just because they don't have a little CSA sticker on there, you're responsible for what you're living in. And if it starts leaking, then you fix it, right? You can safely live in an RV for year round. Doesn't matter where you are. So that's my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Sparrow also brought up issue around lot size, and we had already brought that up to look at density on smaller lots, to approving a accessory dwelling unit on a smaller lot. So we are looking at that. I brought that up. There's been requests at Sprout Lake for that, and wasn't approved because of the law. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, no, this has been great discussion, super helpful for us. We really appreciate it. The third topic that we looked at was off-street parking and docks. So off-street parking was discussed in each area. There was a general consensus that we heard that the current regulations are too restrictive in residential zones, and that there's a need for greater flexibility in parking of boats, RVs, and trailers on a residential lot. Where challenges were identified, they were focused on nuisance concerns, where a lot can become unsightly if the units are not cared for, or if there's a large number of units parked on a lot. It's important to highlight here, and Mike touched on as well, if the zoning bylaw had no regulation on off-street parking, it would be much more challenging to deal with nuisance issues when they arise. And that was really reflected in a lot of the community discussion as well. Additional concerns include the potential impact on street parking and visibility. There's a lot of discussion in Banfield specifically on the need for more parking in general within the community. Suggestions for regulating parking include ensuring that it remains off-street, limiting parking within front yards, minimum setbacks from lot lines, and dealing with those nuisance properties, as I mentioned, where appropriate. Any discussion on parking?
Thank you. One of the things that was brought up was the fact that I don't know, some people have a lot of vehicles in their yard because they have a lot of people living in their houses and back to housing again. If a lot of the vehicles are insured, they should be roadworthy. If that's the case, they shouldn't be derelict, right? So if they all are insured and that's expensive, then they shouldn't really be a challenge that way. But you have to keep them off the roads for obviously for emergency vehicles, because some of our roads are quite skinny. But as far as the numbers go, as long as they're insured properly and they're not unsightly, then they shouldn't be a problem, I don't think. It's when you get you guys have a museum of old art that packs sitting in the front yard might be an issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Parking on the roads at Sprout Lake is an absolute issue, because our roads are very narrow, winding, blind corners. When you have a lot of people with trucks with boat trailers, etc., parked on the road, especially around places where the higher density is a real issue. Lakeshore near Tall Timbers, huge issue, because the road is so narrow, it's very dangerous. So it is a safety issue. Driveways with multiple RVs parked on their property is considered by residents at Sprout Lake that they're being inhabited. So that's an issue. So would like to have some kind of an understanding as to how to deal with excessive vehicles parked on a property. It's just an issue that there may be no one in them. I have a fifth wheel on my property. My son has, in 6 years, has slept in it 2 times. It's there for storage only, basically. I have a couple of boats on trailers. Everybody seems to have 2 boats, maybe a jet ski, maybe a sailboat, maybe a tin can, whatever. There's multiple toys that people have, and accessory vehicles, quads, trailers for those as well. So interesting topic. Thank you.
Thank you. So in Beaufort, a lot different. We don't have lakes. We're not running around with boats and jet skis and all that kind of stuff. But we do got tractors. We got tractor trailers. We got utility trailers. We got quads. These kind of things. Majority of people say, "Stay out of my land. I can do whatever I want," and I agree with that. As long as you're a good neighbor and you're not unsightly and creating a problem. It's when you start to create a problem, how do we identify that and how do we deal with that? Which is a growing concern, and we need to figure out that. But that's gonna be different in each area. Right? When our houses are 300, 400, 500 meters apart, what you're doing is not really going to affect your neighbor very much. But when you start putting a bunch of shipping containers next to there and a bunch of whatever it is, and you start to upset your neighbor, then you got to figure out how to way to resolve that. And if you're parking boats on the road, that's obviously a safety concern. But one thing we got to realize here is we're dealing with an affordability problem in this country right now. Interest rates are through the roof, although it's only at a 20-year high, and we're all older than 20 years. We got it through the 80s. We know what interest rates were like back then. All the young people that are out there now with new mortgages, they're all hurting. Okay? They're not driving around in Teslas and multiple boats and all this kind of stuff. They're barely surviving right now. Their interest rates and their payments are through the roof. Regulating that they can't store a boat here on their property and have to put it $100 a month in storage at commercial property, I don't think that's right. So we've got to find a way to make this place more affordable as well. Tax increases, we're going to talk about that in a couple months. But that's always got to be in the back of our mind of what's actually happening. Thank you.
Fair comments. Thank you very much. Docks are continuing to be discussed mostly in the Sprout Lake and Banfield areas. Slight majority of total survey respondents do not believe the ACRD should regulate docks. Within those areas, 45.5% of Sprout Lake respondents and 61.5% of Banfield respondents do not believe the ACRD should be regulating docks. The main reason given for not regulating docks is the overlap provided by existing provincial and federal regulations already, and a desire to not add any additional bureaucracy to that. Where support is given to regulate docks, it is focused mainly on dealing with those largest docks and the ones that are most impactful on the neighbors and the environment. There were a range of perspectives, again, given in Sprout Lake, but a general desire to limit the largest of docks and to regulate the private marinas that have popped up on the lake as well. In Banfield, I feel like there was a general consensus from everybody we talked to. The docks are already regulated enough through the province and the federal government, and that there's an urgent need for more docks in more moored spaces as well. Any questions or comments on docks?
Okay. Going back to where regulations for docks came from was actually from a request from the community because docks were being built on Sprout Lake that were getting larger and larger and sticking out farther and farther and creating safety hazard as identified by residents that lived at Sprout Lake, and their neighbor builds a huge dock with 2 boathouses and stretches out way beyond all the rest of the docks, creating a hazard when you try to come in with a boat. So there was a group that got together and put together a bunch of information as to what regulations could look like. And it kind of layered on top of the provincial regulations. I think that what they brought forward was very good information that was brought forward. The one problem with provincial guidelines, I don't believe it works on the private land side of the ENM line, which is 50% or maybe even more of Sprout Lake property owners. So the provincial guidelines might not work there. That was what the previous board had identified before this new board, and that's why the regulations were coming in as they were. I would really love it if it was just the province that was looking after these. But knowing that the private land is not regulated by there, we need to have something in place for docks. Also recognizing that the provincial standard doesn't work all the time. There is a process where you can apply and ask for whatever you want, but it needs to be approved by the province on that side. I believe that what the staff were trying to bring forward was also something that could be varied by property owners, so that you didn't have to stick to the postage stamp because boats are bigger. You may have 2 boats or whatever. There's no boathouse real coverage that can accommodate the size of boats that are out there now. There's also bays that you can't come straight off. You're going to have to come on an angle and people try to work together with their neighbors. With the lake level this year that went down so low, docks were high and dry. So they needed to be dragged out because if they had the opportunity or if they weren't positioned permanently, just so that they could be out far enough into the lake because the lake dropped so much this year. Another reason why I really would like to see this regional district create a water committee so that we could take into consideration property owners and water access as part of that. Rivers, making sure that there's enough water in the rivers as well. There's docks on the rivers too that probably have the same effect when the water's so low, which is not taken into consideration with any kind of dock regulations. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
So I got a question. Now, obviously, there's no docks in Beaufort, but it's a contentious issue. Could it actually be resolved that you actually have a clear definition that the people want regulations or not regulations? Because 52% said they don't want it. Is there actually a way to get a definitive answer, say, yes, we want it, don't want it? How do we actually get that answer from the people, what they actually want? Like, is there, you gotta have a referendum about it, or how do we actually do that to get the exact thing?
I don't believe the numbers are correct. That's people that responded, those numbers. So there's a lot of people that didn't attend the open house or the Sprout Lake owners meeting. So there's a lot of people that are gone right now that are permanent residents that live at Sprout Lake for the winter. I know quite a few of them that are gone and haven't responded to any of this. So yeah, I find that the numbers are not completely correct.
So follow up, specifically, this is more of a Sprout Lake, maybe Banfield problem where it's more seasonal owners. How do we actually get the right numbers so that's a non-issue? Should we just do this in the summertime when people are actually there, or are they all renting their houses out in the summer? Like seriously, you have to find a point where you're gonna, this is what people want, and we're gonna move forward. Like, what time of year do we actually have that so this becomes a non-issue?
I'll jump in. I'm not able to answer the question as far as are we going to have a definitive answer. And in all of my time working at the regional district, we spend a lot of time dealing with the neighbors fighting over docks and how they're located. I think there's people, a lot of waterfront owners want to have the dock whatever size they want in front of their property, and they don't want anybody to impinge on them. So this issue has always been contentious, and it comes down, land use comes down to a lot of it is what is in the public interest. So is it in the public interest to regulate? Is it in the public interest to for the local government to leave it to the province? And we that is the case in a lot of places. We have this unique situation in Vancouver Island where the Inland Land Grant goes through the east coast of Vancouver Island, and the beds of the lakes are privately owned. and it's the where it's privately owned, it's the bed of the lake, and the surface is still provincial. But we have not seen the province willing to do any sort of regulation for docks. They'll do environmental environmental protection. They will do enforcement of environmental laws with the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, but they don't want to. They haven't wade into trying to regulate docks in that area. So it comes down to what's an appropriate size and and where to go. And in the end, it comes down to will be this group, these six, voting on whether there's regulations there or not. And certainly, I think a lot more, as we're going to talk about next steps, the public engagement component is very important. And each of the open houses, I know in my discussions as I was talking to people and the message we were providing, this is really the first phase or step out of numerous steps, 5 steps. So we're going to be coming back. And so I think, just more discussion, maybe we have some specific discussions around docks or targeting certain groups. And this issue applies, to a number of issues that we're talking about today. And, whether it's home business and home industry, really the same kinds of principles apply in that you have some people, wanting this much and other people's wanting, a lot less or a lot more regulations. So it's, and it comes down, the planning part of it is how do we develop some rules or regulations that are, meet the public interest and meets the requirements of the community. And because we still need to do the environmental protection, right? I mean, the thing about docks, is the bigger the dock, the more environmental impact it has. Sprout Lake is a very, very important fish lake. Sockeye spawning is incredibly important, and these docks, these kinds of things, do affect that as well. So, there's the Ministry of Environment and Department of Fisheries and Oceans input as well. It also becomes really important. So, I think as a first step is more engagement with the community and more education about why. Because that's the underlying message we got is need to be providing more information to people and having more discussion, and then where there's opportunities to educate people, we can educate them, or provide the information. This engagement, when we talked about as we went in there, is the goal was to go and listen to what people had to say, find out where concerns were. This was I think that was the most important thing for us to do, was just go out and listen to people. Whereas the next stages will be bringing back, having these discussions about docks and RVs and housing, which I think Alex is still going to present that. So hopefully that answers it. I don't think we're going to have a definitive answer on this.
Just follow up. Thank you, Mike. So if we're questioning the letter from the Sproul Lakes people of unauthorized meetings and not trusting the numbers that are coming out, this comes down to getting good public engagement, which will be different for each area. And I think we're seeing that. And if we only have 13 people show up, but we have 100 people in the town hall. So looking forward, it's going to be getting effective community engagement from whatever area you are, so that questions of not believing the numbers or whatever they are, those questions all disappear because the public's watching this and they're listening to what we're talking about, and they want us to do what they want. We're voted in by them to do what the public wants. So we just got to make sure we're doing it. Thank you.
Okay. There's no more on that. We'll go into a light subject: home industry and home occupations. So yeah, this is one of the more engaged topics in each area. As we know, there was widespread support that we heard for continuing to allow home occupations and to expand them in the residential and rural areas. 88.9% of the survey respondents support home occupations or home industry uses in their area. The support for allowing home occupations is broad, and it's highlighted by a desire to expand working from home options, diversifying the economy, incubating new businesses, and allowing people to make a living on their property. There are lots about that. Where home industry was discussed, there was less support for allowing light industrial uses or home industry type uses in rural areas where they can become a nuisance, and a recognition that some of these uses are, can have a negative impact on the neighborhood through increased noise and odor, pollution, and unsightliness. 65.1% of survey respondents are not supportive of a minimum lot size for home industry, but if a minimum lot size is needed, what we heard was that many respondents highlight a range of the 1 to 5 acre minimum that could be appropriate depending on the type and scale of the business, and that would be to intend to respond to nuisance concerns. Any comments on home industry and home occupations? I know it was well discussed throughout the region.
I'm just curious. I heard people talk about, rather than using a lot size to decide on the type of business, to use a process like, going before a committee, depending on the nature of the business, whether it be allowed. Did you hear things like that?
Yes, we did. And there was a lot of discussion around advisory planning, commission's input, which I think, we've always, it has always been a very important part of the land use planning, the zoning, and at the regional district. And I think this home industry one was, again, I think this needs a lot more. Yeah, it's another topic that we need to have a lot more public input and a lot more information to go out. Certainly the 5 acre home industry was something that really, it became a real a hot topic and a real lightning rod. And when it first came out, it caught me off guard, because the whole intentions with both home occupation and home industry through the draft zoning bylaw that we were working on is to allow more than is currently allowed. That has always been the intention. That's what was drafted and put forward. And through the engagement part, what we heard is maybe it needs to be more, and there's ways to do that. But again, it comes down to the public interest and what's appropriate. And while you can have committee input, I'll go back to the APC part. In the end, it is the electoral area directors, the board, that votes and sets the land use regulations. So whether that's through a rezoning application, whether that's through overall zoning regulation changes to expand home occupation, home industry, home business type uses, or whether that's through temporary use permit. The advisory planning commissions all have input, but in the end, it comes down that the legislation is required. The Government Act requires the board and the way the voting structure works. In our regional district currently, it would, most of the time be the 6 electoral area directors voting in that decision. So that, it always comes back to you guys. So, so that's the process. But I think there's a lot more opportunity, and I think some education to really, go through and find out what types of home industries, people works in the areas. And we have a lot of examples of home industries or I'll just call them home business, because it encompasses home occupation and home industry. And I think this was part of the confusion for the public. But there's a lot of businesses operating out there that don't have a negative impact, that work. And the economy's changed. And I think one of the things is meeting with some of those people and having a discussion about what works, and having a discussion in a way that is a safe place for people. So we're not using this as bylaw enforcement, but a discussion about how do we amend the land use regulations to set some zoning bylaws or rules that allow people to do what they're doing. Like when we had started this, and this is going back over 10 years ago now, when we started this, there were some discussions around, expanding out into accessory buildings. So right now you can only have home occupations, and it can only be in your home. So, it legally can't be in your garage. So, but there's lots of opportunities, I think, to expand those uses. And some of the other things we heard was scaling. So the bigger the property, the more more uses or the types of uses that could happen, on smaller properties, maybe, certainly, I think we should be looking at expanding the types of home businesses that are permitted, but maybe some of those need to be enclosed. And again, I'll go back to my other comment about nuisance. We can't zone to allow something and then regulate it through a nuisance bylaw. So if somebody's allowed to do a business or industrial use on a property and it's noisy or loud or smelly, it becomes very difficult, and we will often lose in court if we try to enforce a nuisance bylaw on something that the underlying land use allows. So I know that's a bit long-winded. It's an important topic, and it's something I wanted to have an opportunity to talk about with the EA directors. Is where we were aligning and wanting to go. It is in the public interest to allow more. That was always the intention, and I things got kind of went sideways because a lot of the concerns from people about the types of businesses that wouldn't be allowed under the 5 acre currently aren't allowed. So whereas we were looking at providing more options, and that minimum lot size can be looked at. It's different in different areas, and again, the scale and uses can change based on lot size. So I'll stop there.
Thank you. So one of the concerns I think is the usage, right? If you have a independent user like doing physiotherapy or something like that, it doesn't really matter in the house or in the garage kind of thing. It's a quiet thing. Where the problem comes in is when you have smaller lot sizes and you have a problem with the environment, whether it be the noise pollution or the water pollution or any other pollution aspect that might be associated with it while there's the neighbors. So as far as it goes, it's a quiet industry, then nobody really complains when it gets to a point where it's actually impacting the neighbors and their quality of life and may be affecting the value of their house values going down because of the quality of life they have. It becomes an issue. So those are the things we have to try and find a balance to try and go ahead and move forward on all this. I think that was part of the problem. Was it wasn't the 5 acre per se, but it was what you're doing on that property to impact your neighbors that is causing issues. So
Can we have Veda and then Penny?
Thank you. A concept that was brought up at our table was the idea that there be 3 different levels of home businesses. The base level would be a home business that in no way impacts traffic flow or water or resource use and is contained within a property. And it was pointed out that home businesses can actually run out of apartments. A person who is a seamstress is not going to be creating noise pollution, change traffic flow, or increase the water usage, for example. So to me, the concept, even for regulation and enforcement, would be if there is minimal impact by a home business, that the size doesn't need to be regulated, and it's only if there are complaints of noise or whatever that then it would have to be looked at, is this really a small business? The next level would be a medium business, which you may want to go to the minimum lot size and perhaps have more regulation, because those would impact perhaps traffic flow. Like I can even see physiotherapy as impacting traffic. And then have the more industrial, it being much more regulated. And I think that in the long run is just going to save a lot of bylaw enforcement issues.
Thank you. And Penny?
Thank you. Concerned about that we've listed here cannabis production. So is that not already permitted on for people that are growing? Seems to me that we couldn't regulate it, that we don't know where they are. The RCMP doesn't know where they are, but the neighbors know where they are. Thank you.
So yeah, growing cannabis is certainly it has been a hot topic for a while. And Alex, I think I got this right. Federally, the legislation allows anyone to grow 4 plants on their property. There is also medical licenses for medical purposes that people have, and those are the ones that you're referring to, Director Cote, where people we don't get notified about those. That they're for medical purposes. They can be wherever they when the license is issued by Health Canada, they're allowed to have a grow up or production facility based on the number of plants listed for the medical licenses for that property. And then there is also, in the draft zoning bylaw and the current zoning bylaw is that cannabis production, commercial cannabis production, is only permitted in certain zones, and it's not a home occupation or home industrial use, and it wasn't contemplated to be one. But hopefully that answers the question.
Bullet, please. So a person can have 4 licenses. That doesn't even have to be their own. I know someone who had one, they passed on and the license continued because it went with the property. So that would be a home industry in my mind. And it's permitted. So
I don't disagree with you. But it is federal legislation, and we are not permitted, like local governments are not allowed to regulate what it's in that federal purview. It's not. These are the things that are imposed by provincial and federal laws.
So then it's listed here because it's not one of those type of licenses.
Correct.
Yeah, just to reiterate that. So the what we listed in the summary report were the main concerns that we heard, and we talked to multiple people, and there were lots of respondents that said you need to deal with this, and where we had the opportunity to have dialogue with those people, we can help explain that we're not able to regulate facilities that are licensed under Health Canada, but we certainly wanted to identify that as an example of an issue that creates a nuisance in the neighborhood.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to bring up one other thing about home industry, home occupation. Not everyone can type on a computer and make money. People need to get calluses and do something physical to make money as well. So 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago, basically BC government shut down, locked down a whole bunch of stuff for COVID-19. Restaurants, hotels, tattoo parlors, beauty salons, playgrounds, everything stopped. Thousands of people unemployed instantly. They do not want to go back to a job that can be shut down on 24-hour notice for whatever future pandemic appears. They're hesitant to go back into the industry. That's why there's so many problems hiring people for that. They all found other jobs working at home, either designing websites or whatever they're doing, chopping firewood, whatever it is. That's why we're having a lot of push for having less regulations on what they can do with their land, right? Not everyone can sit in their kitchen and make money on the laptop. So we have to allow what people want to do for that. But there's also a balance between being a good neighbor, not using air chisels at 3 a.m. to clean off a logging truck, and having some common sense regulation. That's a balance of what we need to find out. But I think the general trend is less regulations, and it's going to be different in each area. People in Sproul Lake are out there to have a good recreational life. They don't want to hear loud noises in the middle of the night. We don't want to either, but there's a general trend of this wants to happen more in the rural areas, but maybe not in some of the more areas where people are living close to each other. Thank you.
Thank you. I've been around so long that I've heard lots of complaints from different areas, and not just Sprout Lake, regarding industry over the years. Very little actually for industry at Sprout Lake. It's more been Beaver Creek mostly, where the noise issue or construction, somebody playing a radio full blast all night long. It's common sense is plays a big part here, and some people just don't have it. So that's where the regulations need to come in. And myself, I can see parallels here that could cover all areas. So thanks.
Okay, so we'll thank you for that discussion. We'll just get into the last topic here before we start looking at some options for what we do moving forward. Agriculture and animals were discussed in each of the areas as well. The results are summarized on the slide here of all the data. One aspect that I just want to pull out is the 63.4% of survey respondents support limits on livestock and poultry based on lot size. Limits to poultry were discussed primarily in the smaller residential lots, and limits on livestock were discussed on those lots in the 1 to 5 acre range. It was highlighted throughout this engagement that the keeping of animals regulations would not apply to land in the ALR and would also not apply to lots that are larger than 5 acres. So each of the areas had differing perspectives on the challenges for keeping with animals and raising food on their properties. In Banfield, there were challenges highlighted about small lots, poor soil, lack of available compost in the community. In Long Beach, there were concerns about wildlife interactions and for runoff contaminating water sources. In both of those West Coast communities, there were comments about noisy roosters as well. In the Sprout Lake area, concerns were expressed about contaminating the lake water, and that's that provides the drinking water for many of the residents out there, and that was a concern. In Beaver Creek, the cost of community water and the impact that has on raising livestock was highlighted. In Cherry Creek, many commenters expressed a desire to remove government regulations and apply a more common sense approach to limiting the number of animals per acre. And in Beaufort, which is mostly ALR and mostly larger farms, highlighted a need for more meat processing facilities. That's been discussed for a long time, and there's no regulations that would limit the number of animals on a farm. Any questions or comments on agriculture or keeping of animals? So with that, I think Mike's gonna. Oh,
Yeah. I'm quite involved with water testing, and it all stemmed from E. coli poisoning in Sprout Lake. So from a farm. So regulating how people deal with their animals on their properties that are over 5 acres, that are either on the lake shore or right across the road, or creeks that run into it, is a huge concern to everybody. Everybody at Sprout Lake, their number one concern is always water quality, because that's our potable water. Thanks.
So I got a question. Does everybody just drink water straight out of the lake, or do they filter it? Because it's a common thing that keeps coming up, and it involves other things. That people have sediment filters, because we're all on well water. We got sediment, charcoal, UV filters that whatever's going in there, we're killing anyways to take care of it. Chlorination systems. Thank you.
I can tell you that it was, I don't know, 18 years ago or whatever, when started testing water because of the acknowledgement of the E. coli. 100 tests were done by residents. About 32, I think, at that time actually had traces of E. coli in it. And people, from that point on, I had a water fair for the community to realize that they were drinking raw water. So many of the people that lived at Sprout Lake had, it's water. Where do you get your water? From the tap. They didn't realize that they were actually drinking raw water. So it's been an education for many years. That's my pet project that I've brought forward, in my community was to make sure that people realized that they were drinking raw water. You come from Vancouver, you turn on your tap, you don't know where your water comes from. As long as your pump is working, that's fine. I offer these water tests continually. I just did one about a month or so ago where 25 people, I think, actually tested their water to make sure that their filters were working, or would find out, if they don't filter. There's still people that say, I've drank the water here from ever. I'm not putting in a filtration system. That's where everybody is their own water purveyor. So whether you have a well or you draw from the lake, early on, I was told that you could drink water from a ditch if you wanted. If you are your own water purveyor, you get it from wherever you want. I also test the water spring that comes out at the end of Sprout Lake, because there is so many people that get their water from there. And this is the first time that I've ever seen it with high total coliforms. Pass that on down the road. It's not my responsibility. It's not the regional district's responsibility, but there's still a lot of people that drink that. It's raw water.
Thank you. Just a follow up. So we're not expecting the lake to be potable water, and regulating farms that discharge into it. I mean, that's a factor, but there's lots of septic systems and other things there. Wherever they are in relation to someone's property, it's all going to the lake at some point. But we're not expecting to expect the lake to be potable water. Just like everywhere else, we're not expecting our wells to be potable water. And it's up to the individual people to make sure that they're drinking safe water. It's not up to the ACRD to say you can drink straight from the lake. So I think we're getting deep into a rabbit hole here, but I don't think we need to keep it going.
The water test that came from that, it was a farm that was across the road, hit the ditch, the creek that went down into the lake. The E. coli was over 100, which is extremely high. I want to make people that live at the lake, like I said, their number one concern is water quality, because we're drinking that water. We want to make sure that it's able to be potable. Like even though you can drink a filter and UV, it's still going to have that pollution in there. High total coliforms. I wouldn't want to be drinking the water. I want to make sure that there's protections on the lake, so that restricting farm animals, there still is farm animals that are close by, but having some kind of a restriction and making sure that the pollution from those farms are not ending up in the drinking water.
I just have a question. Doesn't all raw water have coliforms? Like, I don't think I've ever seen a positive or a test where it was raw water and it didn't have something in it.
I can answer that. With all the many years of that I've been doing testing, there is sources that have no total coliforms or E. coli. Many.
If I can pivot from E. coli, I'll just flag that the other complaints that I have received regarding water are about people's enjoyment of rivers and lakes, particularly with algae bloom. And so, and the impacts on natural systems that when we see things change, people usually let us know. And that's where concerns come up. They see something out of the ordinary, and I'll flag algae bloom as being one of the more common calls that we get. And it's for us, it's following up, and we have done various tests or worked with others who have done them and can explain what nutrients or what certain elevations of certain chemicals are causing certain blooms, and that can be either linked back to industrial or agricultural use, depending on the case, and that's where it comes in as a concern. And so for us, the big questions around all of this is our ability to act if required. Do we have the tools to act on issues that come up if we're required to act. We don't seek them out. We respond to complaints. And so a lot of the dialogue that we'll have internally and usually bring to this table is around the effectiveness of our tools. And over time, we'll build tools. And I think what we've seen in our outreach in the last month is that a lot of the public feel that we built too many tools. So it's time to peel them back. But as we have that discussion, we have to realize which are effective and which perhaps aren't, and why. And if they're not effective, do we get rid of them or do we adapt them? If they are effective, why have they been effective? And do we leave the status quo or do we adapt those? And so it is a bit of a wholesale change, but it always will boil down for us to the effectiveness of our ability to act. And our concern always comes up when there's no ability to act, because we are still the most accessible level of government. If it's provincial jurisdiction, the likelihood is slim that they're going to reach out to Victoria. If it's federal, well, it's even slimmer that they're going to reach out to Ottawa on it. But they will most certainly come into our office. And it's extremely challenging for us to say, we don't have a tool to help you. So I want to flag that because I think it's pertinent to everything we want.
I'm just curious, is the ACRD a water purveyor in any area?
We have several water systems.
Yeah.
But viewed as a water purveyor, like I think for Beaver Creek, it would be the city of Port Alberni that would be the purveyor.
But there is.
Yes, so there are areas that we're still responsible for what is delivered to the door. So as soon as it crosses through our system, so even though the city delivers to our distribution system, we're then responsible for the distribution beyond that point. In Banfield, we're responsible for that, and we have water operators that in essence take on the liability, which is why we'll have designated either a level, typically level 2, but it could be level 1, level 2, level 3, or level 4 treatment. Nonetheless, even though they're responsible, we as an organization are responsible, and we're accountable to that.
Thanks.
That's great discussion. I think Mike's going to walk us through the 3 options that are presented in the report, and we'll allow some time for discussion on this.
Yes. So if everybody agrees, I think I will run through each of the 3 options, and then I expect there'll be some good discussion and debate. So I will just go ahead and run through. Okay, thank you. So the first option presented is to proceed with a comprehensive review and updates to the 6 electoral area OCPs prior to considering an updated unified regional zoning bylaw that includes individualized area-specific general regulations. And really, so go with the complete the OCPs first, then revisit the zoning bylaws once the OCPs are done. And I do want to note, that the 6 OCPs date back to the earliest from 2007. That would be Long Beach. And the last one was 2014. So it's been a while for all of them. And based on the recent community engagement, they don't appear to reflect the community values. And I think Director Boyko's comment about with the pandemic and the lockdown, and that's changed a lot of how people live on their properties, but also how they conduct business and where they work. And I think that the working from home needs to be incorporated into our OCPs and any updated zoning bylaw. So there is the option to maintain one regional zoning bylaw while including area specific zones, and we do have some of that now. There are some things that are specific to certain areas, in some cases specific to certain properties. And so there is certainly that ability to expand that, to have even general regulations that apply within specific areas. So I think that's important to flag, and that is the recommendation that staff have. The other option two, is proceed with updating the proposed zoning bylaw, P 1333, the draft one, before the OCPs. And the HRD did receive a lot of broad and wide-ranging input on the current zoning bylaw, as well as the one that was drafted. And a lot of the input that's received could be incorporated into that bylaw. And then following the adoption under this option, the HRD would proceed with the comprehensive review and update of the 6 electoral area OCPs. But given the feedback and input received on the OCPs, it would be likely this would be confusing to the public to go with this option. As we did the open houses, we talked a lot about the community planning process as well, and I think there's a lot of good reasons to proceed with the OCP updates. And then option 3 is again doing the OCP updates first, and then working on individual zoning bylaws. Whether that's anywhere from more than one, being 2 to 6. The board has that option. The development of additional zoning bylaws would extend the project timelines, and certainly is the most resource intensive option. The most costly option to go forward with. And again, like I said, the highest time needed and resources to do this. And again, in the report, it lays out staff do not recommend that the board advance this option without first considering a report that specifically addresses the staffing and operational implications associated with developing and implementing individual zoning bylaws. And there's certainly the time it takes to create 6 zoning bylaws, because we already have 6 OCPs. But there's also the administration, and zoning is really the administration and implementation of the community plans. But some things to consider, and where some of the extra costs come in. I'm going to use a couple of examples on where the province is required us to update our zoning bylaws. So we have one coming up where the housing regulations are changing around accessory dwelling units, and we talked about it at the last board meeting. There's going to be some regulations being drafted, and we're going to have a really tight timeline to amend where accessory dwelling units are permitted. And so we have one zoning bylaw to update. If we have 6, we have to do this times 6. And the other one that really comes to mind, just on the administration of and the time that goes into administration, is when we work through the cannabis regulations as cannabis was legalized, and requirements to update our zoning bylaw, and the time it took, and certainly the community input and the concern from the community. That would be something that, again, if we had 6 zoning bylaws, that would be that times 6. And there was, I won't say hundreds, there was thousands, over 1,000 hours of staff time. We worked on that pretty much for a year, took up the majority of staff time, just responding to the concerns around cannabis and where they were going to go, the confusion with the public around medical cannabis versus commercial production, where local governments couldn't regulate. So I just want to use those 2 examples to help facilitate some discussion with the board, and just to explain a little bit why staff are recommending it. And again, this is a board decision, and we will proceed however the board directs us to, but it has to be in the context of the resources, and I think from my perspective, I think it's important to focus on the good planning as opposed to just the administration of bylaws. We do a lot of administration of bylaws, and conducting public hearings and things like that. So it's just I will stop there, and I'm sure there's going to be some discussion. I'm happy to answer questions.
Well, thank you for doing all that. My one question is, as you did this, all these open houses throughout all the community, how much of the bylaws seem to be unified together? I mean, the docks and Banfield and Sport Lake are obvious outliers, but when you look through all the rest of them, how much of it was like 80% of it was sort of unified, or was it completely different as you went through all the different areas? Or I'm trying to get a handle on what would be the best way of doing this, because if they were completely different, that's fine. But if majority of us are pretty solidified in what we want with a few individual things like, well, ADUs and livestock and that, then maybe it'd be better to have one base unified bylaw with separate individual ones as opposed to 6 separate ones. So can you answer what was going on there?
I'd be happy to speak to that. So I think as we talked to everybody in all of the open houses, and I attended everyone, there were a lot of commonalities that we identified that are really dealt with through the general regulations, things like home industry and home occupations. Certainly a lot of alignment between Cherry Creek, Beaver Creek, and Beaufort on that. A lot of perspectives in Sprout Lake align with that as well. And then Banfield and Long Beach also wanted more opportunities to expand home industry and home-based businesses uses. So if you look at if we looked at a unified bylaw that had general regulations at the beginning that would be specific to, in these areas, this is where dock regulations would be in place. In these other areas, there are no dock regulations that would exist. Or off-street parking, for example, in Beaufort, we had a discussion about that, where the off-street parking regulations will not apply to rural properties, to the rural zone properties, and 99% of the properties in Beaufort meet that rural standard anyway. So there, we could actually exempt the off-street parking regulations from Beaufort while implementing them in other areas and maintain that within one zoning bylaw. And it would be one section that that could be presented as a table or something like that at the beginning of a bylaw, and then we would have a regional set of bylaw codes, your residential zones and your commercial zones and your industrial zones, where the individual permitted uses would be. Hopefully that helps. It's really hard to quantify, what percentage of commonality there was, but there really is I think a unified vision for how the region wants to move forward on a lot of these issues.
One part of the follow-up also is not look at us individually, but also as a region, because as people move into the region, if they want to do a business or home occupation, whatever they want to do, they should have a standard to go across the entire region. If Cherry Creek and Beaufort and Beaver Creek, which are all side by side, are all different, you could have different industries across the road from each other, and one would be legal, one would be illegal, and all that. So, and so for investors coming in, they need to know what the commonalities are and what the OCPs and the bylaw commonalities are, so they can actually look forward to trying coming to this town and doing something. Whereas we have 6 individual, completely different bylaws on every step of the process, and it may be confusing people understanding exactly where they're buying, because we get confused exactly who's voting where. So you understand the issues, right? So, thank you.
Thank you, Mike. You brought up an interesting point of you getting confused about where you are and where you're living, but I think it comes down to knowing what you're buying and what you're moving into and where you're living. When I moved here many years ago, I had a very thorough look of the zoning bylaws and part of my land's in ALR and had a good look at what I can do and what I can't do. It comes down to having a good look at what you're buying before you pull the trigger and knowing that. There are some places where there's different boundaries across the street of you're in Beaufort, you're in Beaver Creek, and I live on one of those boundaries. And I know exactly what I can do in my place and what my neighbor can do, and we have a very good relationship. But I just want to bring up a couple things here before we get a little bit interesting here. So one of the things that came out of the OCP review, and thank you very much for putting time and effort into that, planning staff. Majority of the survey respondents in every open house expressed the desire to have individual zoning bylaws for each area. Lots of reasons for that. Each area is different, and we're here to respect what the people want. There's a strong mandate in at least 3 electoral areas based on town halls of various kinds, authorized or unauthorized. to have individual zoning bylaws. Okay, each area is different and they want to be treated differently. The whole thing that's triggering all this momentum is the whole zoning bylaw review project. And that's creating a lot of anxiety with people. What's going to happen? Is their business going to be shut down? We have stopped businesses in the past year based on things. And people want to know and have some input on what's going on. And they're clearly showing that they want to have individual zoning bylaws for each area. Each area is different. And our job is to represent what the people want. Thank you.
Just before you move on to potentially considering which option, I do want to flag that the staff's role in this is obviously to make recommendations. And part of the reason for the recommendation that I want to come back to, Mike touched on it, but it's the cost at the end of the day. And one of the big areas that we talk about is taxation. And I know that a big theme that has come up in a number of public meetings is also the growth of staff. And so I do want to flag the reason why we want to start from a position of a unified zoning bylaw is because it is the most cost-effective method for advancing. And you know, regardless of how we come to a final decision, we will at some point come forward and talk about the carrying cost of any tool, unified, separated, some hybrid model. We'll look at all these various aspects, but we will come back because we have to come back to the board and talk about how we would implement this and the costs associated with implementing various elements. And we do know that that's very often we talk along the lines of time and money. When it comes to planning, time has been the biggest factor. We've been asking to process things faster, get things across the line faster, and part of that was the system that we run, and the other part was the amount of staff that we have dedicated towards processing the volume of requests. This same discussion is going to come back, regardless. It's going to come back because it's central to how we implement the tools that we're creating, and this is why we just want to make sure that we do want to respect what the public is asking for. What we want to make sure is the public understands all the costs associated with the requests that they're making so that decisions are made eyes wide open, big picture. When we recommend continuing with the OCP process, there are many more nuances that we want to explore that may have impacts on a zoning bylaw, united or divided. And we want to make sure that we conclude those discussions around the OCP prior to advancing with the zoning bylaw. Again, it's less confusing for the public. We just finished telling them that we're at the beginning of an OCP process. I think it would be confusing if we started adopting something related to the OCP where the public's saying, hold on, you just told us that this is a long process and now we're into a public hearing for a zoning bylaw. What's going on? And so what we would prefer to do is finish the discussions with the OCP and then bring forward both. You'd have your OCP and your zoning bylaw discussions, public hearings, and adoption in whatever format. But we feel it would be clearer for the public to be at a decision point for both at the end of a process that has contemplated all elements. All we can do is recommend, and the decision is yours. And that's I just wanted to make sure that we weren't missing those factors.
Thank you, Daniel. I just wanted to do a follow-up. I think that just follow up. What's that? So as a follow-up, I think we've done a lot with educating the public over the past year and a half about what OCPs are, zoning bylaws, and I think they're quite a bit more educated than they were and aware of what's going on. Money is a factor. So I'm just going to bring up one thing here. I'm just looking at the budget, financial plan. So we're looking to spend $24 million, plus or minus a little bit here and there, in expenditures. We need to figure out what is the most effective thing to spend money on. And I think this is the biggest factor that affects people's lives. What they can do with their property, how they can make a living, etc. Put millions of dollars into fire halls, man, they're important. We all need those. Millions of dollars into parks, et cetera, et cetera. So when we come to this in the next couple of months, we'll be spending a lot of time prioritizing what public actually wants and figuring out how to minimize tax increases. But we definitely got a strong mandate that this is what they want. That's all I'm gonna say. Thanks.
Thank you. Sorry, I had my hand up quite a few times. I have heard that there's areas that want to have their own zoning bylaws, and that's, interesting that we're rushing into this without all the information. I'm very much open-minded to the option that as being one of the options, but I want to know all of the information before I would ever commit to that. I do think it's going to be cost prohibitive, but I'm not sure about that. I think, and I also think that there's a lot of similarities across the region that will all have our zoning bylaws will look the same, or very similar. And I think that I'm waiting for staff to come forward with telling me how that we can have those differences within our areas within one zoning bylaw. So I'm hoping that that could come through, knowing that staff, we don't want to increase any more staff. And then it would be zoning, OCPs have in the past have taken like a year to go through, with one after the other, maybe a couple in a year. It won't all happen at once. These things take a lot of time and a lot of input, and have to really commemorate or congratulate staff on making sure that they're getting real good community engagement going forward. They've taken that initiative now, and I think they're doing an excellent job. If people will actually engage. It seems that some of the Sprout Lake owners did not attend the open house with 9 staff people there, very well laid out, and you guys did a great job. There was a lot of negative comments regarding the ACRD, that these people don't want to be involved with the ACRD process, is how I'm taking it, which I'm really happy for the engagement, but we need to be partners in this going forward. All of us need to be partners, because I want to be able to support all of your area zonings and OCPs going forward. And I want that to happen for myself as well. And I think that we can work together and build proper OCPs and zonings going forward that will help to represent all of our community members. I don't want to be standing divided at all. I want to hear what people have to say, and I want to make sure that we're making the appropriate decisions. I've always felt that way. Communication is key, and getting that input from the community is important. I do like option 1 with the with one slight modification, that if going through the OCP process, if we find out more information regarding separate zonings, that makes the perfectly good sense that we can afford that. I'd like to see that option also. Thanks.
I'd like to say something here, unless someone else needs to speak first. For Beaver Creek, I think a unified bylaw is mediocre. To me, it's trying to please everyone rather than focusing on each individual area's needs. An individual bylaw would achieve what our communities want, and they are very different. I've gone to several meetings, I've read lots of material, and there's lots of differences between us. Personally, for Beaver Creek, we have a very strong mandate from the people of Beaver Creek for individual zoning bylaw. So I'm heading towards option number 3. I think we can afford not to do it. I mean, it's not that much when you look at it. A lot of it's copy and paste. There's just a little bit in the middle. Yeah, that would be really good. Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. So cut and paste is an important thing, and it creates a lot of good things and a lot of bad things. So I've got interested in zoning bylaws when my neighbor wanted to put in a huge cannabis production facility. And I spent a lot of time going through the old bylaws, new bylaws, and the updates and track changes, and I got the whole thing memorized now. But basically, there's 5 main sections of the zoning bylaw. Part 1, cut and paste for each one. There's going to be a little bit of minor changes. Part 2, interpretation. I don't think there's going to be any change. Part 3, meat and potatoes, 20 pages 29 to 49. That is where the advisory planning committees and the directors are going to sit down with staff and hash out what's important. The rest of it, parts 4 to 16, most of that will be the same for everybody, but some of it will be disappearing in each zone. So there's not, I see there will be some staff costs to this, but I don't see huge staff costs. And most of the important things are in part 3 that will be changing. And that's the meat and potatoes of docks and parking and RVs and blah, blah, blah. People care about this. But like Susan just said, I don't think we can not do this. This is the most important thing that's going on that people actually care about, and they've raised their voices to it. Getting engagement from the public, whether they're having separate town halls or they're going to meetings. If you're having more people go to a town hall than a public hearing organized by the ACRD, something's wrong. Something's wrong with how we're engaging with the public. And we need to figure out what that is and solve it. That comes down to us and staff figuring out what to do. Okay? And it's not happening in one electoral area, it's in 3 now, or getting more. But we need to figure out how to effectively engage with the public and get what they want to hear. Thank you.
Thing is, there's 2 questions. One, the money issue, and I thought Mike was going to bring that up later on sometime today or later. I don't know. Sure. Yeah. And the second question is, if I'm not mistaken, the way you said it, everything, all the sections, only one section you're concerned with. Wasn't that sort of what option 1 really is in a way? I'm sort of confused on that one too.
That is what the recommendation is, right? So a lot of it is shared in common, and for us, the reasoning for exploring that in greater detail prior to pulling out any specific areas is that if a lot is shared in common and we can still respect some of the nuances between areas within one zoning bylaw, then every time there is an amendment to that bylaw, we're covering 6 areas at once. So in essence, it's roughly a sixth of the cost to update a zoning bylaw that impacts all 6 areas. And what we would prefer prior to making a decision, if costs are going to be factored in, we prefer to take the historical costs, like our zoning bylaw is 51 years old this year. And I think it's been amended close to or just over 1,000 times. So roughly speaking, 20 amendments a year. And if we want to break down those costs in terms of staff time towards it, we can get you a number along those lines. Again, we'd be trying to make an estimate of the future based on the past, but it would be a factor of 6 if you have that. And we think that could be significant. Now, it could be that this is a priority that the board says, you know what, we're happy with that and we'll adjust appropriately. We will do as we're told. That is our job. We just want to make sure that we have the opportunity to share that information because we feel it's significant.
Thank you. One question. When we're looking at paying for this comes out of general budget, doesn't it, for all of it?
I can speak to that, and then Terry can help me. So this comes out of the rural planning budget. So that is land improvement taxes for the 6 electoral areas, and then there's a set fee that Capito pays to participate in anything that relates to Clay West Sound. And the legislation the way it's written and the way I understand is that it is a land and improvements tax. So it's I guess, you know, how whether it's one bylaw or 6 bylaws, it's still the same same base. It's the 6 electoral areas, same tax base for that, and it's the same people voting, right? Like, just so it's clear, so it's you know, regardless if it's one zoning bylaw or 6, it's still the 6 electoral areas voting, and then sometimes the people.
Oh. That's probably why. Veda, would you like to speak?
Thank you. Just reflecting on what I've learned over this past year, it's really nice to be working with a group of people who have the interest of their community in mind, and yet we are working to support each community in the way that seems best. And given that and what I've learned, I think we do have a common base of basic bylaws that can just be sort of accepted. And then the individual needs of each community specifics could be addressed. And if that means that the processes will go faster, I think it's in everyone's interest to continue to work together like we have been doing on what we have in common, and then focusing on the differentiation. I think that'll decrease workload just based on what staff has said and what I've learned over this past year. So yeah, I would have to go, I think, with option 1 currently.
Thank you. Mike?
So I'm hearing 2 views, option 1 or the individual bylaws. Is there a process where you could do a hybrid? Where if 2 areas wanted to do their own personal bylaws, they could pay for it out of their areas, or do all 6 have to pay for what they want to do?
You have a good point there, Mike, in that, or Director Sparrow. When you look at every regional district in British Columbia, there are places that some places might have a unified bylaw for a couple zones, and then individual zones have their own. So that might be a way that we can do this as well. And that could be up to give or take.
I think we'll talk about costs, and then I'll talk about the land use part.
Yeah. We have chatted about this. We have not got a formal legal opinion, but our interpretation of the legislation and kind of what's on the ministry website is that rural planning is done through the rural area service, which is through letters patent and the legislation itself. And it is done on the basis of land and improvements across the electoral areas. We can always get a legal opinion about other options, but the funding mechanism that I'm aware of across the whole province is rural areas all pay. So if you wanted to do 6, it would still be land and improvements across all 6. I don't know of another funding mechanism. We might be able to convert it into a service establishing bylaw and create something creative, but we would definitely need legal opinion on that.
So on I think the other part of Director Sparrow's question was it doesn't have to be 1 or 6, right? It can be 2 zoning bylaws, you know, covering two different areas. You know, so that it's possible.
Is there anyone else that would like to comment? Fred? Bob?
Thank you for the discussion this afternoon. At this point, I would be supporting option number 1.
Can we add a fourth option?
Certainly can.
No, sure. Thank you, Chair. We do have the option of doing that, is that the directors can respect what their people want and work towards, say, if some areas want to have option 1 and work towards having a unified one, they can do that. And other people can say, no, we want to do what people want and we're going to listen to them and we're going to get our own. And if that's changing one section and getting rid of a lot of other stuff that doesn't need to be in there, go for it.
Thank you. So I had suggested earlier that I supported number 1, but I wanted to know if we could get the information regarding the zoning, separate zoning bylaws going forward before we committed to doing it as one. So that would be my motion to go with option 1 with the option of, in the future, once we get the information on cost and legal opinion, that we could make a decision then on the zoning. Thanks.
So before we do any voting on that, is this just a question of cost, or is this a question of what people want? Because we need to be very clear on what we're going to do here going forward. It's going to cost an extra $100,000 a year on a $24 million budget. I don't think that matters. If the people want it, that's what they should get, and we can find somewhere else to cut. So we need to be very clear on what we're going to put forward as a motion and put a time frame around this. That if that's what people want to do, it can't. I don't think it should just be a question of cost, because then you don't need elevators and fire halls. You don't need this. You don't need parking, other things. We can figure something else out.
Thank you. I think it's important that we get that information. Maybe we need to defer this decision until a future meeting. I think I need to have that information regarding cost. And there was a few other questions about dividing up the zoning bylaws into different areas. So I would like to know that information before yes.
Beta?
Thank you. I don't think it's just about cost, and I don't think it's about how well we're representing our populations. I also see that this is a time issue and a staff resource issue. So on the one hand, people are saying you don't want to increase your staffing, but on the other side, you're adding this extra burden of work. So I see this as, I think it needs to be rethought within the whole context of the process. This is not just about we can be our own community. This is about, can we still work together, and can we afford to have all of these different bylaws being developed, which would be a significant cost and staff time issue. I think this is a much bigger ball of wax to look at, and I agree with holding off and rethinking this, because it just being whether we're representing our population and whether it's a money issue, it's much bigger than that. It's whether we can work together. Thank you.
Because no motion has actually been formally moved yet, perhaps we can blend it and have 2 motions. It sounds like there's agreement that we would proceed. So the first part of both those recommendations is that the electoral directors receive a community plan engagement summary and recommend that the board of directors direct staff to proceed with the comprehensive updates of the 6 electoral area OCPs. That would be motion 1. So then we get started on that work. The second motion would then be to direct staff to return with a report that provides more details pertaining to the increasing of a single zoning bylaw to 2 or more zoning bylaws, and that the report include details not limited to cost and legal funding structures. And that way, we'd come back with a report that answers that question. We can still get started on the OCP. I think there's agreements on continuing to work with the OCP, and then as we move forward, we gain that clarity and make decisions on what we're structuring for bylaws.
Thank you, Daniel. I think that's a good approach to get this thing going. But if we're going to delay the vote on individual bylaws, we've got to have a report on cost. What's actually going to be changing? Basically, not just me saying 20 pages can change. But we also need to have good, effective communication with the public. So there's a question on who shows up, what they say, and that kind of thing. And I think that's going to depend on each individual electoral area, right? Some people, Downfield, they had a really good turnout population-wise at their community engagement. Beaufort, we had a terrible one. I'm going to be honest. We do better at an alternative method of talking to people. So I think it comes down to the directors to organize what they're going to do in their area, talk with staff, figure out the best way to do that, get an effective message from the public and mandate on what they want you to do. And we should have a timeline that we should be able to figure this out. Are your people going to actually be back in the next 3 months, or are we got to wait till next summer to get everyone back? That's a question that's going to come up here. So maybe in the next 3 months, we can have some kind of effective communication, email everybody, whatever you think is going to do the best. And then people can know and have a good understanding of what the actual voters want. I think that should be included.
Penny?
So I'll make that first motion with the additional community planning engagement, the public hearing bylaw readings, and adoption of 6 OCPs. Correct? Is that it?
I'll read it out that the electoral area directors receive the community planning engagement summary and recommend that the board of directors direct staff to proceed with comprehensive updates to the 6 electoral area OCPs.
Mike, are you seconding? Thank you. Any more discussion? Okay, all in favor? Any against? So motion carried.
Let's just talk about what this is going to say first. So the motion will be what kind of time they want? 3 months? 2 months? The motion will be, we'll come back to reconsider the second part. Either way, what we're looking at is individual stuff for mainly section 3, general regulations of the bylaw per electoral area. Whether that is going to be in the form of a unified bylaw or 2 or more. So we're going to write that down. And in say 2 months, we're going to come back. We're going to have a report from staff on what costs will be. The second thing is have each electoral area director will have effective community engagement, figure out exactly what people want, whether that's in a town hall or whether that's in a public hearing, whatever they want to do, figure out exactly what they want to do. And because we're getting one message from the people and we're stopping that right now. And I want to make sure that that message that we're stopping, we can still get a good indication of what the public wants to move forward. Thank you.
Okay, Penny?
I have a question to staff. I'd also like to have a sooner than later, a cost of what it costs to have those 6 open houses. Because this process is going to have a lot of community engagement. So I want to just, I'd like to have all of that information. Thank you.
Yeah, I will certainly bring back the costs. We're actually working on putting that all together. And then just a reminder around the cost and community engagement is that it was we have $150,000 grant that is covering the community engagement costs, and that's what came out of that. But it also will give an idea of what it costs to go out and do this. So we will bring that back as part of this report.
So do we have a second motion?
I like the way you worded it. I would suggest that for the budget process that we look at a 3-month window. So that ultimately starting the same thing, that the electoral area directors recommend that the board of directors direct staff to come back with a report that considers changes to Section 3 of the electoral area bylaws in the form of a unified bylaw or 2 or more bylaws, and that the report consider costs, such things as costs, legal but not limited to, and further that the area directors are encouraged to engage in further dialogue to gain clarity around public opinion on the matter.
I think that's thank you, Chair. So that's basically end of February timeline. We're gonna look at that. We're getting into budget season. We can work on those kind of costs as well. I think that's good. I think we're all in agreement that each area is individual and has their own thoughts on all the things we've been talking about for the past couple hours. But mainly it is in Section 3, general regulations. And I think we're all in agreement that that will be changing, whether it's all in one thing or if it's by individual. So I'll make a motion, and I'm going to screw up what you just said.
I think that you can just state as
I'll make a motion as presented by the CAO that by the end of February timeline, we will have costs on what the individual bylaws or unified bylaws will be, not limited to legal thoughts. And we will ask each individual electoral area director to consult with their people, their constituents, on what they would like to do. And we already have a bunch of that feedback, and now it's getting a formalized plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? I'll second it. And any more discussion? Penny.
Thank you. Is there a budget that will help to assist the directors to work with their communities? Because I would like to have staff in attendance to be able to answer any questions that the community would have. Thank you.
I would, we'll have to work in the planning department, take a look at the grant. So like Mike was saying, we do have a grant. And with the different forms, I'm aware that there's different town hall meetings that individual electoral areas directors are coordinating. The key difference would be the ability to have minutes if you're having that discussion. And I know there's other nuances, and we'd likely ask planning staff simply to help support. But the difference between engaging as an elected official on your own and having it be a formal collection of information is that those minutes are actually then officially collected and then received and approved at the board level. And that is one of the key nuances that I think would have to be met. Now, with the language, because we're encouraging you, you're not forced to. It could be a survey, it could be something else. You use a methodology. And also, you can't really force an elected official to do something if they don't want to do it. So I think the language is good. It keeps the door open. We'll work with each area director as they see fit. If they're happy with what has already happened, then so be it. If they would like to do more, we'll work with you to do more.
Okay, any more questions or comments? Okay, we're ready to vote on it. All in favor? Okay, motion carried. Yeah, can we take a 5-minute break? Okay, thanks. Okay, we're ready to start the meeting? Or restart the meeting, sorry. So Nate, right now we're at request for decision and Terry.
Yes, thank you. All right. So kind of kicking off, continuing on with budget discussions that we started on the November 8th Committee of the Whole. I thought we would talk today about the Canada Community Build Fund, historically known as the Gas Tax Fund. So just in terms of an overview, the current agreement is actually coming to an end. We are receiving our last payment here in the next couple of days. The province is hopeful that we're going to have a new tri-FAR agreement signed by the end, which is March 31st. However, from a staff perspective, we've been hearing this for about 2 years now. So I'm not sure if it's changing federal priorities or how they're going to do it or what. But at this point, we've been told not to guarantee that we're getting the same level of funding. It sounds like there will be an agreement moving forward, but there's no indication of what funding level that will be at. So staff have provided this as an overview of what was in our existing 2023 to 2027 financial plan. Provided a bit of an overview of the projects as well as a status update. Numerous of these projects are ongoing or just starting. We are recommending that we add no new projects during the 2024 to 2028 financial planning process, and that we just focus on getting the ones that are already in the plan done. I'm not planning on going over the status of each project because I did provide a narrative. I'm happy to answer any questions. Also included in this report is the request from the Beaver Creek Community Club for an additional $50,000 of upgrades to their hall. We have provided some money in the past to do hall upgrades as well as a playground, and all but $2,000 of this request would be eligible for the Canada Community Build Funds. Staff will continue to recommend that the funds are used to support ACRD assets. However, if there is political support to this external organization, then I am confident that we do have the funds available. So the funds that we have are earning interest, and although there's a small negative at this point based on what we've committed to, I know that we will not be spending all this money in the next couple of months. So we'll definitely have the funding to allocate if we want to do an agreement with them to provide them this hall upgrade. We also talked about the Growing Community Fund. So that was that $1.8 million that we received in March of 2023. That has quite similar parameters, but not exact. So we discussed that at the November 8th Committee of the Whole. It needs to be allocated by the board by December 31st. I thought that before we locked in what those project priorities were going to be, that it was important to have this discussion with the board or with the electoral area directors regarding the Canada Community Build Fund projects, just to make sure that we're not missing anything. So that's why that report was referred to this meeting, and we'll go back to the board on the 13th. I also at the time was thinking that we maybe needed to do some shuffling because the projects in the Growing Community Fund have to be linked to growth. And so I thought we were going to have to shuffle some eligible projects between these two funds if we wanted to make them work. However, we had some planning discussions, talked about some census numbers and percent growth in the area, and I'm confident that we meet the criteria for the Growing Community Fund. So the projects that we'd identified on the 8th, which included the fire hall, the 3 fire hall projects, the West Coast Transit bus stop, AV Aquatics feasibility study, the LBA wastewater project, and the ACRD office, do all meet the criteria of the Growing Community Fund, so we don't need to shuffle. Basically, in summary, we're happy to answer any questions today, and we are just looking to get any direction if there's projects that are missed or that you would like removed as we start into this budget discussion process here in early 2024. That is all I have.
Thank you, Terry, and thanks for all your hard work getting all this ready with your department. I just want to say I fully support the Beaver Creek Hall addendum. The hall is becoming more and more useful and more used by everybody in the community in Beaufort, Beaver Creek, and other people that come out and use it. It's got a full-time school there in the basement year-round, and it is being used more and more on weekends and evenings for a multitude of activities. So It's great for the community. It's the only real community hall out there in Beaver Creek, Beaufort. And I just want to say we fully support it. Thank you.
Ada?
Thank you. I just have a question. I know that the Millstream area community, there are a lot of children now. And historically, they would play in the vacant lots, which are now all being built on. So if these funds are directed towards growing community, this would be a new resource, having a playground in the area. Would that kind of a project fit with any of these funds, or where would funding for a playground come?
Yes, for sure. So a playground definitely qualifies, actually I'd say under both. It definitely qualifies under the Canada Community Build Fund for sure. I'm just trying to think like what sort of property we own in the area, and I do know that we have a park that's on the waterfront, but I seem to remember there's some limited access or parking abilities there. But yeah, that's not something that's really been on the radar from a staff perspective to date of that. So it's good to know, but it would qualify under either of these funds for sure.
Okay. I have a comment. I'd like to not move forward with additional capital improvements at Beaver Creek Fire Hall. We need a plan for a rural regional fire service before any more capital improvements. The future of this asset needs to be considered. The location and use of the facility may not be logical moving forward. So I'd like to put $50,000 towards a feasibility study for rural regional fire service. And this might be tied to whether or not Cherry Creek Improvement District is dissolved and rolled into the regional district, which I quite see that happening. I'd also like to put $500,000 of the fund, or whatever we can agree to, into a capital reserve fund for a new source water and advanced water treatment system for Beaver Creek. Thank you. Anyone else have any comments?
With regard to where the hell is it? Alberta Valley Aquatic Feasibility Study, we have the ability to take some of the tax requisition currently allocated to this project and use the growing community funds to do that. I would like to take that other 100,000 and dedicate these funds, and I don't think we need all of that, to have a full referendum by electoral area on the Aquatic Valley once the phase 3 is complete, to ensure that we do have a referendum and not a alternative approval process. So put the money aside right now and make sure that this does take place and vote on. Thank you.
Is there any other? Penny?
Thank you. I'd like some clarification on what Sprout Lake Fire Hall number 3 upgrade, the total amount is that's being allocated.
Yeah, for sure. So that is a little bit of a moving target. So we had originally allocated, what was it, like $500,000 worth of funds. Then when the engineering report came through, it was like 2.4 million. So now we are trying to work on something in the middle. There's a couple of things going on. You've got more members reporting to that hall. We need room for another fire truck, but then there's also the work safe, clean locker room requirements are coming out at the same time. So sticker shock from the CFO on the 2.4 million and kind of like, let's go back to the drawing board. But we were still only had funding for up to 500,000 up until we've started this discussion and we got this growing community fund. So we've kind of just been on hold on it. So now that they sounds like there's some appetite to support the rest of a project to some degree, we want to get a new price of what that renovation would look like. So working with the regional fire services coordinator and the fire chief to do that. There's also been discussion with staff that we've got a bunch of these fire hall projects that are project management focused and probably going to be potentially best led by a project manager person better than staff who are not experts in building fire halls all the time. So we're having some discussion about what that might look like. If we're not proceeding with the Beaver Creek Fire Hall, that would pivot the scope or the amount of work that we have related to it, but we also have the Bamfield Fire Hall project as well. So definitely more talks as we're getting into budget here about these projects and how we're going to proceed.
Thank you. Further, I'm not interested in participating at this time with a regional fire department investigation. I don't think that there's been any conversation with the Sprout Lake Fire Department regarding changing our description as far as becoming a regional fire department. So at this point, I'm not interested in that until I have further updates that this is the direction that we'd like to go. There was some the community also, I'm wondering if there's an opportunity going forward to come forward with another request. I have a meeting with my Sprout Lake Community Association on Monday, and they're looking at the grants that they haven't completed yet. They're getting their prices in next week on what they have to complete. There's more projects than there is money, obviously. But I'm just wondering also, there's another interesting, shall we say, opportunity coming forward with the bombers possibly leaving the property, which may create some deficiencies at the hall going forward. So I'm just wondering if there's an opportunity in the new year to revisit any of the allocations of money. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
So if we unallocate some funding, I'd basically say with the funding is fully allocated at this time until we find out what that money is in March. I do not believe that we will find out that money before we start budget discussions, like the second week of February. We might get some info before the end of the budgeting season for sure, but I don't think that we will have it in advance. If interest rates stay the way they are and we continue to earn interest at the rate that we are on these accounts, there definitely will be money at some point in 2024. But I don't have a crystal ball. I assume they're going to stay somewhat high for a while, but it's not in my distant memory that we were earning 0.07 or something on our bank accounts too. So it's hard to guarantee that money. Definitely encourage them to put their proposal together and we can talk about it as we're talking about potentially eliminating some of these projects, such as the Beaver Creek Fire Hall. There might be more funding on the table. So I would encourage the association to find their scope and provide documentation of what their next steps are. We also have considered, sometimes we can apply on behalf of organizations to get some funding. Like, for example, the Beaver Creek has a heat pump in there, and there has been historically some opportunities that we could apply on behalf of the community club to leverage some money off of an outside organization that's not our gas tax. So we'll continue to watch for those type of opportunities, and then it would free up gas tax money or community build fund money as well. So not a no, but I would say not a guaranteed yes. We have the funding sitting there.
Is there any funding left in the trails either? Thanks.
No, like the allocation that for Sprout Lake, the trails. Yeah, no, that one was completed with the last set of trails that was done.
Right.
Thank you, Chair. I think the discussion is not building a regional fire department. I don't think anybody's looking for that. I think it's having a plan on moving forward, because we keep seeing in the budget millions of dollars going towards fire halls year after year after year. So here's a picture of the fire hall in question. I was going to talk.
Sorry, but Sprout Lake pays for that. You don't pay for that.
We all vote together, and I'm just having a discussion. My point is, I'm an engineer and builders. We can rebuild this thing for less than $2 million. Like, are we throwing money at a dead horse over and over again? Like, I think that's the discussion that the chair is trying to put forward here, is having a plan to, in the next 5-10 years, what are we going to do with the fire halls and the fire departments? Whether it's Sprout Lake, Cherry Creek, separate, Banfield, Beaver Creek kind of thing. That's, I think, what the discussion is. But throwing millions of dollars to the fire halls over and over again, I think, is something that needs to be brought up.
And
Thank you. Sprout Lake pays for the fire department. We do have a long-term plan. We'd love to open up hall number 2 on Faber Road if we had the members. So there's a recruitment drive happening right now, and we're quite happy with our fire hall and the plan that we have at the moment. So because we've never had this come up in the past, looking at a regional fire department, examining that, not particularly interested in putting any money towards it at this time. Thanks.
yeah, no, that's fine too, because it makes sense that Sprout Lake not be included in a rural regional fire service because of the miles and the way that fire truck needs to travel. So it'd be good for the other rural areas anyways.
We do have automatic aid assistance with Beaver Creek and the city of Port Alberni and Cherry Creek Fire Department. So we are working together. We support each other. Maybe we could ask for a report on fire halls as far as it stands, not as a regional.
So I thank you for asking the questions as well. I think it becomes a little more clear for staff as well. If we're looking at a plan for the fire hall, from what I'm understanding, then just to get that clarity, it would be that we would explore the use of the building itself, perhaps the location, possible partnerships, sort of reimagine that, come back with a bit of a plan that could consider its use. Is that what you're talking about?
Well, that is part of it, but it's also looking at it from a rural, from another perspective too, especially if Cherry Creek Improvement District is dissolved and becomes part of the regional district, then there's going to be 2 fire departments side by side that could easily have cost savings between them. So that could form a rural fire service area, one service area. Yeah. So let's look at what's the best. Plus a community center, it doesn't make sense to have it as a fire hall, nor does it make sense to have an elevator. They're very expensive to operate. And so there's just a lot of research that can go into this that would make it a better plan.
Thank you. I think that's a little more clear, and then we keep Sprout Lake on your own.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
My only concern, and maybe we can get by this, but we don't have jurisdiction over Cherry Creek. And so I don't have the ability to, I don't know where my abilities lie in terms of being able to spend money on studying their service when it's not our service. So I would just have to look into that. It might be something, if we get agreement from the Cherry Creek board, that we could proceed. But the ministry wouldn't want us to be stepping on toes of another government without a partnership approach to it.
And that would be good. And it's fine without them too. It would still need feasibility study with or without Cherry Creek. The main part though is to get the water system, everything going towards the water system as much as we can.
So these funds would be allocated by this year, but can they be moved around after this year? And the reason I'm asking is because we're talking about Cherry Creek, and we shouldn't really be talking about them until they are a service area or not a service area, but when that happens, I will be on bended knee here, looking for every dime I can get, so, if it's available to get now, I'd like to put my fingers on top of it.
Yeah, so, okay, there's the two funds. So the Canada Community Build Fund, we already have $600,000 allocated at this time to Cherry Creek Waterworks. They are just finalizing the last pieces of information they need to require for us to develop an agreement with them. We're hoping to bring that back on the December 13th board meeting, but the ball's in their court at this point before they can start spending that. In terms of water, we could actually we've given them lots of Canada Community Build funds in the past and could do it again. The Growing Communities Fund is for our staff only. It cannot be given out to outside organizations. In terms of allocation, I would say that we will definitely be able to reallocate. It says that we have to allocate the money and that I have to report that as a non-audited statement to our audited financial statements. So basically, I will have to lay out what our plan was and then what we've spent in the year. There's nothing that says I can't reallocate the following year as long as we continue to explain it on that appendix to our financial statements. But again, really hoping that these Canada Community Build funds are coming through for another round. I think they're a great ability for local governments to take care of our assets. And so I'm hoping the federal government agrees and continues to provide them. And then definitely, we are starting that Cherry Creek discussion with the consultant right now, including their assets and what they have. So we're aware that they also are going to need money at some point.
Is there more discussion?
All right.
Fred?
Thank you, Chair. I'm just looking at population statistics versus allocation here. And I think one of the questions is, so 6 electoral areas and where money will go. The city doesn't come into play because they have their own money for the, they have their own money for the Growing Community Fund allocation. Okay, so their population, their funding doesn't come into play. So, for example, Beaufort of the 1.9 million should get $90,000, but as allocated 0, except for the things on the bottom, which would be the Aquatic Center, 100 Canada, 200 grand Long Beach Airport, and 75K for the office addition, right? Beaver Creek population should be allocated 589,000. Currently, until we do a motion, is allocated 550,000. Cherry Creek should be allocated 400,000. Is currently allocated 0, I believe. If I'm correct. West Coast, I haven't done the math yet, but 275. Sprout Lake should be allocated 445, but it's currently allocated 700. So this questions some balance here by population on where the money should go.
Yeah, for sure. The Growing Community Fund, the province is explicit that it is not to be allocated by population. That was the formula that they have developed, but they are really clear that they are not to be allocated. What is happening across the province is we are sitting on this money and people are sitting on it. And that's part of why we're struggling to fight the federal government to get us more, because we're a small regional district, but we still have 4 million of it sitting here or something. And so they're begging the federal government to provide us money. And then the electoral areas, because every electoral area is different. Like, for example, Beaufort doesn't have a service that is Beaufort only. So it's actually kind of challenging, especially before we were able to give it out to the Beaver Creek Community Club. It was incredibly challenging to find anything that could kind of benefit the area. So now the province is saying, listen, regional districts, we're only willing to give you money if you stop allocating by population. We definitely do kind of look at it for sure. I think as we allocated these growing community funds, it's really an impact of where is that growth going to hit? And like Bamfield's prime example, like there's going to be growth there. I don't think anyone's going to argue that fact. So we need to deal with the assets that are there. It's definitely a balance. I think that from a steward of the assets perspective, I do respect the population percentages into some degree, but it's really where those funding gaps are existing. And I'm looking at core infrastructure like water, fire, transit has been a huge issue on the West Coast that we're trying to address. And so we need to find some funding for that. Yes, we could do it more on a population basis, but do we want this money? Yeah, I guess it loses its relevance and its risk level of what it's achieving. Sometimes when we're looking at it from a purely population, for example, parks and trails, as you were mentioning before, like I want to hit core services like fire and water. I don't want to be dabbling in those things that they have a lot of grant success outside of these programs. And this really is for that core infrastructure that we're looking at. Until water source became a discussion this year, like the Beaver Creek water system is actually in fairly good condition. We've got a quite a regular biannually upgrade going on that we are able to fund between grant funding and capital reserve. And so it's getting way better than it was back in the day. Bamfield needs some work. We have a federal grant that we're hoping is going to come through to help us with that. But yeah, if the board would like us to rework and be more on an allocation that works, the problem is then I'm going to have a whole bunch of projects that are partially funded and nothing fully funded, and we're not going to be able to accomplish any of them because of the funding gaps that exist.
And I thank you. Through the chair, I just wanted to echo that. I think that's why we tried backing up to try and show wider timelines and more projects as well as that. A lot of this wouldn't be possible if we followed a strict formula, because you'd have to be taking on debt. And so it's easier for us to just be mindful of who gets what when, where we're helping, and knowing that as we move forward and hope that new funding comes in, and we're paying attention to all of these projects so that they can, everyone can sort of seek benefit on the long term, perhaps not in specific windows with specific pockets. And so we try and blend it all. And I just wanted to flag that because I think we achieve more by taking that wider view. Yeah, so thank you.
Thank you. Addressing the issues around water and such protects all of us because we're all liable for those systems. So making sure that Bamfield has good water connections is important to all of us. I do have a question also around a drought study that I've been requesting for quite a while now, a couple of years. We did the flood study at Sprout Lake, and I really think that we need to do the flip side and find out the drought situation and how to deal. I think that that's the other part of the information that we've got. I think that it's incomplete without the drought study. So I'm wondering, I don't think that this should be used, these grants, or could they be used, or is there another grant? I know that you said you're at capacity of applying for grants, but I'd really like to see this happen, to find some money in 2024 to address a drought study. I think that will help us with all of our water issues, knowing more about drought as well as flood. Thank you.
So we did recently get a grant for a climate action plan, and the climate action plan and the development of that is going to open a whole new world of doors in terms of grant applications. And I know that drought and flood, like the two extremes of the same topic, are both going to be part of that climate action plan discussion. So it's definitely not lost on the radar. I think that really that climate action plan is somewhat required by the province. So we'll check that box for us, but then also open these funding doors. So still on the list.
Any other comments?
Thank you. I'm just concerned about the two comments for the two large fire hall upgrades, that there's a lot of approximate words in here and initial redesigns and things like that. So we're throwing large sums of money, it's like over $1 million, 1.2-ish, potentially into different things. And it has potential to open into a large can of worms. And if we're going to look at either using these facilities or moving them around or rebuilding them from scratch and making them seismic and all the other nice words that need to happen, I think we should look at that. Because putting large $1 million into a building that can be rebuilt for that price from scratch, brand new or less, rather than keeping it operational and building around existing operations, is always going to be challenging.
It's kind of a chicken and an egg situation we've got ourselves in here. Engineering costs are changing and requirements are changing actually relatively quickly, I would say. And so we haven't done the detailed design work because we didn't have the funding. So now that we might have a potential commitment for the funding, now we can go get the engineered and bring that back to the board. Basically, at this point, we've kind of been doing it off of estimated cost per square footage for some of those projects. So it's really, it was a wish list item in terms of we needed funding for it. It's like Banfield Fire Hall. I don't have insurance on the Banfield Fire Hall anymore because I've lost it type idea. So there's definitely some need for them. Sprout Lake definitely has a need. I would say Beaver Creek, from a clean room perspective, definitely has a need. There's other options to do on an interim basis if we decided to proceed with more of a longer term look. But I wouldn't say this is you saying go ahead and do a $1.2 million renovation. This is saying like, yeah, further look at what this cost is going to be and bring back us some plans so that you guys can have a better look at what's going on. But until I had that, the engineering or the costs per square foot are changing so fast that they're not relevant as soon as they're on paper. So.
Thank you. I have a question. Can we include electoral area individual zoning bylaw development costs? Just being that that was just our discussion earlier.
We can check and bring that back in the report, but from our Terry and I have had discussions, the community plans can be part of it, but not the individual zoning bylaw. And I know we looked at that because we allocated funding to community plans.
The OCP in here, right?
Yeah, so the OCPs met the criteria, but the zoning bylaw regulations did not.
Oh, sorry, Bob.
Thank you. As Terry mentioned, we can't even get insurance on the West Side Fire Hall. And from a volunteer firefighter retention standpoint, from an operational perspective, I would appeal to the board and to staff that we get on with getting that building replaced. It's an embarrassment. Thank you very much.
Mike?
Thank you. I'm thinking you want to put $50,000 towards a study for regional fire. This Lake is only part of, which means Banfield's too far away from, which means you're alone because I don't have one. How do you do a regional study with only one fire department?
It's not just about, it's about a future regional fire department. We did talk about it earlier whenever we decided to pay for a full-time fire chief. It was brought up then that we didn't have a plan and that we were going to work towards it. So this is putting funds towards studying the idea of a regional fire service. But it's also more so about the future of the current asset, the fire hall. It needs to be considered, and the location and use of the facility may not be logical. And that's because it might not make sense to have a community hall and a fire department. Like, to me, it doesn't make sense at all. So that's more so about the $50,000. Is there any other comments or? Yeah. Okay, should we bring this, does anyone want to make a motion?
Do we have multiple motions here? Because we should talk about the first funding thing. We're just, hold on, screwed.
So we don't need to talk about the growing community fund because I think both of these, oh no, because you've exceeded the. So, Daniel?
No, I think we can, I think for the purposes of the discussion that we want to have, we wanted the list, we can rework the list, and that goes back to the board. So I think I would just keep it simple, and based on the discussion that you've had, to approve the list as amended today. We will come back with that for a board meeting anyway. We'll flesh out some of the details where it seems a bit nebulous. We will reach out to you if we need help to make sure that our report is accurate. And but I think it's just easier to keep it as an umbrella right now and say, here's the revised list that the EA directors support, is what I would say. But I'm looking at you, Barry.
Just wondering if we want to say that we confirm the projects with the amendment of removing the Beaver Creek Fire Hall project following a feasibility study, and adding the $500,000 for Beaver Creek water source following its feasibility study, because that's not under this funding, but is something that's going on at the same time, just so that we know that it's only those 3 items, the removal of the fire hall and the addition of those 2 items that are being discussed, because we've had a lot of chatter about stuff, and I've definitely made some notes that we'll bring back, but I'd say those are the only 3 changes, and then Beaver Creek Community Club. Let's do that as a separate motion, because I'll have to bring back an agreement for that one, if that's okay.
That's what I think. But just some clarification. So you're taking the money from the fire hall and putting it into a study for water?
Not the whole amount. The $50,000 would be for a feasibility study for the regional fire service, which includes the actual existing building too. And then $500,000 would go into a capital reserve fund for new source water and advanced water treatment, which will be in the future. So, I'd like to comment too that when I was at a meeting in Victoria, and it was when I was on the board for the people that lend money. Pardon me? Yes. And there was a government official that sat beside me. And he said the beautiful thing about this funding or these types of funds is that you can put it in the capital reserve fund and you can work towards, getting at least half before you have to tax people on getting the other half of cost of advanced water treatment. And I can't remember the number that was given here that what it would cost, but somewhere between $6 and $12 million for advanced water treatment. Well, this just, would help that so much to get started because we know it's going to happen.
Sorry, I don't know that's going to happen. I don't have the study yet. So, but I've seen lots of studies too. But until the staff actually bring something forward that we can.
How about this one? We don't have an agreement with the city of Port Alberni right now. We have nothing. So we need to do something.
Yeah, go ahead.
And so the way I'm understanding this is that so we received notice and we've had one meeting with staff with the city of Port Alberni, and Jen's putting together a report that's going to go to the Beaver Creek Water Advisory Board. We have an agreement in place that lasts us right through to the end of 2025. So in the next year, what we're doing is Director Roth has asked that we do a study on engaging for primary water treatment on the Snap River. We've done that in the past, so we have a starting point where we can actually build that up. And so that is an area that she is, I think through resolution, that was supported, so that's on the docket. Now that's going to take some time, and we're still having discussion with the city of Port Alberni. The city of Port Alberni is going to also be doing work on their water rates and water system, because they have some work to catch up on as well. So what we've agreed to do is that we're actually going to be making sure that we keep open lines of communication, so that ultimately when we come back with reports, probably a year from now, it would be our hope, we're in a position to say, this is what the two systems look like. This is what it would look like if we remain connected to the city. These are, cost benefit analysis. This would look like if we were disconnected, cost benefit analysis, have that conversation. So what I'm understanding is that you would want 500,000 sit in the capital reserve fund pending the outcome of all this discussion, so that if you do go independently, you have your leg up on at least some costs, and if not, then it's reallocated in some way, shape, or form. But it's hard to guess how in the absence of the report, which you are accurately asking for, which is at least a year away at this point.
So I'm just wondering then, why are we allocating money in 2024 when we won't be using it until 2025? Seems that
But you do capital reserve funds.
it seems it's before we have the information we're allocating. So I just wanted clarification. Thank you.
Fred?
I'd like to make an amendment to what you're proposing. The clean room, locker room is required at the Beaver Creek Fire Hall. That still needs to get done. I think money should be set aside for that, whatever that amount would be, to ensure that that does take place.
We can come back with a report about that.
Do you want to know what the clean room or the cost of the clean room? Because the
We
clean,
wanted it separate.
yeah, the clean room, when you come back, technically you're a hazmat person on feet, what you are. So you have to bring back your gear, and you have to wash that separately, which you already do, but you have to wash you and shower you and wash your clothing now. You can't bring your clothing back because you're hazmat. So it's going to be a locker room with a shower room for the firefighters. So that is one or two, or how many have to be nowadays, the separate lockers with new clothes. So it's probably going to take the bottom floor out and make it into a shower room. There's not much room on the bottom floor left, other than the offices, because the rest is all trucks and turnout gear. So they're all contaminated. So that'll all be done. So they'll reworking the bottom floor.
I thought I read that it would be in a separate building. Is that not right?
My understanding is it would be in addition to the hall that would be separate. And then they would have to leave everything there and then enter the building. So yeah, it's not a minor adjustment. It would be something, but as per cost, I don't have any idea.
Well, yeah, because you want to make sure that the volunteer fire department, that all the people that do the work have everything they need to do the work properly. But at the same time, you don't want to spend money, without a good plan, really is what it is.
Oh, one more thing about the community, the volunteer fire hall Beaver Creek, is the fact that they hold your elections there. So we have to find a way of getting people that are not able to get up staircases to be able to vote. So if not there, you find another hall somewhere else where you can have these meetings, and that also is an additional cost. I don't know where that's going to come from either, but I know it's not the best thing having a fire hall as a community hall. It's probably one of the worst things you can do in a way, but until there's a separate way of doing it, we got to find something that will work for everybody.
Yeah. Is there any other comments? Right?
We do hold elections there. It's one day every 4 years. I know I'm not a popular person when I say that, but there could be a way of doing it. It's existed for many years. I think the big concern here is the last sentence that's in here. Another option we consider a feasibility study consider the future of this asset and whether location and use of the facility continue to be logical moving forward. We've already done a couple major upgrades. We did one, 9 years ago at this place? Seismic upgrade. And now we're doing more upgrades. Is a feasibility study to say, are we going to keep throwing money at this or build a brand new fit for purpose one next door, behind it, beside it, wherever? And that's the red herring that's sitting over this option.
If I may, yeah, there's also the timing of the Cherry Creek discussion, right? Like if we have the water individuals in the building as well, if we were to move the Beaver Creek water staff out of that building, then potentially that area that they use could be repurposed for the fire department and you'd need some renovations, but could become the clean room. But we don't have a spot for them. So then if we have Cherry Creek convert and we end up with Cherry Creek water employees, would it make sense for both crews to be operating out of the same location? Potentially. So that's what I mean. This one's not as easy, I would say, as like the Bamfield Hall discussion or even the Sprout Lake Hall discussion. It's got some discussion to be had. Then on the flip side, we've got these work safe requirements that we need to make sure that we're can be able to comply to and keep our volunteers safe. So as much as it might be putting some money that we're only going to use for 5 to 7 years, when we're dealing with work safe matters and the safety of our volunteers, then we might have to decide to just choose to do the clean room addition at this point, even though eventually it might be a sunk cost, but it's safety. So I think there's all good components to it.
Beta, did you want to speak?
Thank you. I just think we've kind of gotten off of sort of the board agenda here, and we're talking about management of programs. And if we can just get back onto the board agenda, I'd appreciate it, I think.
Okay. Any other discussion? Amended motion?
Amended motion and a separate motion for the.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so would anyone like to make that motion? And if not, I will.
I'll do the one.
So I'll make a motion that the Electoral Area Directors Committee direct staff to include the use of the Canada Community Building Funds, new name for the gas tax fund, for the Beaver Creek Community Club for hall upgrades in the amount of $48,000 in the draft 24-28 financial plan.
Seconder? I'll second. Okay, any more comments? All in favor? Motion carried. Now for the second part of that motion.
The other one's a separate motion.
Yeah.
So if this is helpful, I think it's fair to say that the reallocation of the Beaver Creek Fire Hall funds would be such that the first priority would be a feasibility and examination of the highest and best use in terms of location and a future building. So before you renovate, that would be first. Roughly 50,000. We can get a quote. We work, but we know that's our first and highest exploration. Second would be meeting the safety requirements with the decontamination room, and then anything that's left would be prioritized pending the discussion around water as a capital reserve. And I think that would fit everything. And so if the committee is good with that amendment, then we would move the block as amended.
I would like to make that motion. Can I please have a second?
I'll second, but I got a comment as well. So my comment will be based on the study that comes out. The other items in here, such as the elevator and the other upgrades to the upstairs heat pump, kitchen, etc., if it is determined that this is the best location for keep the Beaver Creek Fire Hall long-term, that those items will be considered in a future meeting and put forward.
Bob?
Thank you. I just want to circle back to WorkSafe BC and the requirements for decontamination, washing of clothes, showering, etc. Can I get some clarification on when does that come into effect? Because I want to make sure that we are in compliance. I would hate to see us get written up. So I guess that's a question to staff. When does that come into place? And how are we going to address it? That to me is a real concern.
Thank you.
We can get our fire services coordinator or manager to provide a report of the dates of that for sure.
Okay, so sir. Oh, any more discussion? Okay, so can we vote on the motion then? All in favor? Okay, I can't see.
So the motion that you're voting on is to approve the projects as identified and amended. And the amendment for the Beaver Creek Fire Hall section was that those funds would be used to look at the feasibility of the building, the location. Would also then be used to meet the safety requirements for decontamination at the building. And then one of two things. If it's deemed that the building is at the ideal location and should be renovated, then those other items such as an elevator and whatnot would move forward. If there's something different, then those funds would be put aside in the capital reserve, primarily targeted for water, but most likely to be brought back in a 2025 budget discussion once we have information on water.
Okay. Does everyone understand the motion? Okay, can we vote on it then? All in favor? Okay, motion carries. So now we can move in camera.
Yes, you need to have that. If you have, I'd like to make a motion to move this meeting in camera under the Community Charter, Part 90, Section 1. A part of the council meeting may be closed to the public if the subject matter being considered relates to or is one or more of the following. Article F, law enforcement, if the council considers that the disclosure could reasonably be expected to harm the conduct of an investigation under or enforcement of an enactment.
I just wanted to comment before the live stream ends that we don't have any questions from the public in Zoom or via email. Thank you.
I have a question. Do we have anybody watching? Did we?
Not that I can tell from
Okay,
from here.
thank you.
I got a question about how you determine who's watching. Are you just looking at the Zoom part, or can you tell how many people are on YouTube watching it, which has like a 5-second delay?
I can't tell that from where I'm sitting here right now. We can certainly tell that looking at analytics after the meeting. But I am looking at Zoom at the Q&A, and I can just tell that there's nobody submitting any questions. But
And I can also confirm that there is no attendees right now in the meeting, and I always remove them before once we go in camera.
thank you.
Okay, can I get a seconder to the motion to go in camera? Seconded by Mike Sparrow. Okay,